Good evening. If you'd like to make a public comment tonight, please fill out one of the forms in the back, and we'll put your name on our list to speak. We do need a form filled out, though. Good evening. We are convening to open session of the Roseville Joint Union High School District Board of Trustees regular meeting for Thursday, September 9th, 2021 at 7:05 p.m. Welcome as we meet here on the campus of Wood Creek High School. Barbara, will you take the roll, please?
Eddie Hall, here. Julie Hirota, Scott Huber, and Andrew Tagg.
Here. All 5 members are present. Mr. Huber, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Certainly. Please join me and stand to salute the pledge to our nation. Salute. Pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right.
Okay, a reminder of the meeting protocols. There will be an opportunity to speak to the Board of Trustees on items not on the agenda during public comment, item 3.5, and an opportunity to speak to items on the agenda when that item comes for consideration. We ask that you fill out a speaker card in the back, identifying yourself by your name if you're an employee of the district, if you have students in the district, or if you're our community member. Also, please let us know the subject in which you would like to address the trustees. If 1 to 9 members of the public wish to comment on agenda or non-agenda items, the timeline for public comment would remain at 3 minutes per person. If there are 10 or more members of the public wishing to comment on an agenda or non-agenda item, the timeline for public comment will be 1.5 minutes. This meeting is being audio and video recorded as well as streamed, and you can find the stream link at the district website. We do have students present, so we are, as a board, wearing a mask, and we would like to ask folks to wear a mask if you have a mask available to wear during tonight's meeting. Report of action from closed session. We took up item 2.1, 1 in closed session on a motion of Board Member Constant, seconded by Board Member Huber. The Board of Education voted to approve settlement agreement with special ed case number 2021-060289 by a vote of 5-0. Also on item 2.2, the board took action to suspend a permanent classified employee for 2 days without pay on a motion by Board Member Constant and a second by Board Member Huber. The vote was also 5-0. And closed session item 2.3 was information only, no action was taken. Item 3.4, communications. Superintendent Becker, do we have any communications? Okay. And takes us to item 3.5, which is public comment on items not on the agenda. We do have a few here. Which item, Barbara, which one is this? You know which? So we do have more than 10, so we'll limit the time to 90 seconds per speaker. And again, we'll announce your name and you come up and we'll have the clock running on the time. Oh, right up. Okay, and when your time is up, we've asked that you finish your comments so that the next speaker can have their time. The first speaker will be Jennifer Santry. And she'll be followed by Charlie Vanderveen.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Santry. Ooh, I'm really loud tonight. I wanted to first bring up to the board the agenda item that seems to be missing, which I emailed you about, and that's the COVID update. I'm really surprised that it's not there. I know that we're trying to focus on more positive things, but there's still a lot to talk about. For example, the health department came out with new guidance on the 1st. I know that because I believe Mr. Becker emailed me that something had to do with indoor sports and volleyball, and I don't know all of the details, but I do know I have a friend that has a daughter that plays volleyball, and they were not aware of any of the changes. So just one little example of why that needs to continue being an agenda item. And Ms. Rhoda actually requested that it be an ongoing item a few weeks ago, and so I would hope that it would be there. The most important thing I want to talk about is the independent study the kids are having to do when they're put on quarantine. I needed to find out what was going on with that. I learned through my principal that they're simply using Google Classroom, emailing their teachers, and basically doing their work on their own without any Zoom or help from the teachers. That's just unacceptable, and I hope that we can do better for our kids than just leaving them on their own. That'll wrap me up for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Charlie Vanderveen. Next speaker will be Vicky Dannell.
Hi, my name is Charlie Vanderveen. I'm a student at Granite Bay High School. I've been quarantined twice during the coronavirus pandemic. Once last year when vaccines had just been made available and quarantines were strict, and once this year only a few weeks ago. Last year I attended Zoom classes for the duration of the quarantine. My grades did not drop. I texted and called my friends daily and had no issue maintaining my relationships with them for those 10 days. This year I am vaccinated and quarantines are situational. I missed a small portion of my 3rd period class in no other school. I was caught up by the end of the day. I got a COVID test out of caution and made sure I felt healthy. Every time my friends or I have been quarantined, we text each other to let the group know. Our concern is not that we might miss a few days of school, but rather the potential that we may have infected each other with the coronavirus. One of my friends had a COVID scare on Monday. He texted me and others he was in contact with, and I quote, "I'm honestly not too sick. I'm just worried I spread it to a bunch of people." For masking, there seems to be some concern about being able to understand other people. As someone who has some difficulty with auditory processing, I fully understand how impactful that can be. Workarounds are plentiful and accessible. Several of my teachers speak through microphones or repeat themselves in class, and these small adjustments are very effective. Just at the last board meeting, a man could not understand what I was saying. He approached me after I spoke and took a picture of the paper I was reading from so he could read it too. Vaccines and tests are free. They're painless and offered accessibly. I've seen both of them offered at grocery stores, pharmacies, and healthcare offices recently. Vaccines create herd immunity to keep immunocompromised people and young people safe. Tests make sure that you're not getting your family sick. And of course, bodily autonomy and your rights as an individual are essential. Your rights end where someone else's begin. You can refuse testing
Charlie,
and
will you finish your comments, please? Thank you. Thank you, Charlie. Vicky Kenton. Next speaker will be Vicky Dannell.
According to the CDC, the masks do not stop transmission of a virus. According to the CDC, neither the emergency use vaccine nor Comirnaty prevents illness or stops transmission of the virus. If this were about a virus, vaccines or masks, we would be talking about therapeutics, supporting natural immunity with nutrients, and testing people in advance for sensitivity to vaccine injury. The Roseville High School District needs to take a stand for freedom of choice for parents, children, and school staff without prejudice or retaliation from school administrators. The masks harm children socially, emotionally, and potentially with medical and dental illnesses. Who pays for the emotional and medical treatment? Not the school. This school board, the principal, vice principal, and teachers are intentionally committing child abuse, and parents are tolerating it because they don't see any alternatives. There are alternatives. Homeschooling in neighborhood pods is happening across the country and right here in Roseville. I'm happy to connect you with support groups that can get you started. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. Vicky Dannell. Next speaker will be Joel Manfredi.
Hello, it's me again. I've been here before. I'm a teacher in a fellow district, and I always come because it's interesting that it says right here, the Roseville Joint Union High School District prohibits discrimination. However, because I've already had the coronavirus and have natural immunity, but I don't want to wear a mask, I'm unable to teach in your district, which kind of is discrimination in my opinion. I also have heard multiple different scenarios at different school sites, so I'm unsure as to if you guys have a particular set of protocols, why at a specific school site it's different. I'll follow up with an email to discuss that. I also want to discuss the special education students and the lack of service minutes that they have received because of the pandemic and maybe not being able to access instruction because they're unable to wear a mask. I've spoken with other school districts and there doesn't seem to be any type of plan to help these type of students. Again, we'll follow up and hope to hear from somebody regarding that. Finally, it's clear that the vaccine mandates are coming down the line for students. We didn't do anything as a district proactively to fight for choice. We were unable to because of the Department of Health. However, I think there's still time to be proactive and come up with a plan to make it not mandated for our students and give them a choice. I'm also going to follow up with that information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Casey. Joel Manfredi is next, and then Patricia.
Joel Manfredi, teacher at Wood Creek High School. I don't know if it even matters to anyone that the global survival rate for COVID is 99.8%. It doesn't seem to matter that the average age is 78 years old. Right now, they're vaccinating children mandatorily in Culver City School District. Never mind the fact that we're told the vaccine doesn't stop transmission and only lessens symptoms. If that's true, why aren't vaccinated employees subject to weekly tests in our district? If this is truly about safety, I think I know why. It's not really about safety, it's about compliance and control. The vaccines are approved by the FDA. The FDA, fun fact, according to this article from Forbes, gets 75% of its budget from pharmaceutical companies. I don't work for Forbes. They must be conspiracy theorists, though, to say something like that. The FDA always seems to have our best interests in mind. How could they do this? So what's next? Well, in the months ahead, we're going to be bombarded with the message that this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. If you believe that, you probably also believe that ivermectin did not win the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine in 2015. You probably also believe that people taking it and living are drinking horse paste. And teachers have to understand that the mandates are coming. The LA Unified School District is meeting tonight to push vaccine mandates for all students 12 and older. 12 years old, whose statistical chances of dying from COVID is 0. What are we doing? And why is bringing this up so taboo? Why is not wanting to take an experimental vaccine so taboo? Why is it so taboo to have a choice about our own bodies and our own health? Since when did the responsibility of other people's health become everyone's problem?
Joel, your time is up. Thank you. Patricia Wyden?
Hello, board members. My name is Patricia Wyden. I'm the school nurse at a local high school, and I'm here to exercise my civic responsibility. I'm here to express the disagreement with the new public health order requiring all school staff to either show proof of COVID flu vaccination or test at least once per week. As the district abides by the new public order, I would like to inquire the following. 1. What would be the penalty for not doing what is mandated? 2. In case of weekly tests, can the test be done using saliva instead of nose swab? The weak test at this point is a surveillance test or for asymptomatic unvaccinated person. However, a person who is asymptomatic and vaccinated also can be infected and transmit the COVID virus. Therefore, it makes no sense of a surveillance test. Tests should be provided for a symptomatic person regardless of COVID vaccination status. I did have a question and comment to say regarding the mandatory COVID vaccine. However, I see that the district has written the resolution 2116 that the district shall not adopt a mandatory COVID vaccination for students and staff. So thank you. Like many students at Antelope High School, I'm an immigrant to this country. I came because the United States was an example of freedom and liberty in many different ways. Example, social and economic. After becoming a mother, I learned a little more about the history of this powerful nation. Following my son's history lessons through my husband in field books, I'm amazed by the strength and the eagerness of the people of this country to fight for freedom and emphasize it on its constitution. As years pass and history comes and goes, the vision for Thomas Jefferson stands out. Thomas Jefferson points out that each generation has challenges.
Patricia,
However,
your time is up. Thank you. Cassandra Stevens. Followed by Mike Wixon.
Hi, my name is Cassandra Stevens. I have a son who goes here to Wood Creek. And I just want to give you all a heads up. I know there's a lot of talk about homeschooling when the vaccine is going to become mandated. I think today, after the speech from our president, we all know it's coming sooner than later. And the word is that, well, people really aren't going to take their kids out and homeschool. But while I'm here with a microphone, I want to let everyone know that I have coordinated hundreds of people in Placer County. I have scheduled homeschooling meetings with homeschool professionals, and we are actively getting kids ready to disenroll the second they're ready, the second it's mandated. So I just want to let you know we are serious. It is going to happen. People aren't going to cave, and you're going to be missing hundreds of kids out of the school district as soon as that gets mandated. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up and let you know we're taking it very serious.
Thank you, Cassandra. Mike Wixon. Next up is Mike Wixon, followed by Marla Franz.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Tang. My name is Mike Wixon, and I may be speaking about something that gives people another reason to homeschool. I don't know. I'm here to speak to you guys about the Ethnic Studies class right now as I know it. It's in violation of both Title VI and Title IX. I had a meeting yesterday with Dr. Moore. It was a nice meeting. I gave her a list of items that I think are problems with the current curriculum. Among them is the fact that it's completely unbalanced. In that regard, you guys are out of compliance with the education code as it stands right now. And I hope parents understand this because you're completely out of balance. The way that the material reads in curriculum is, I would probably seem like some crazy person to say it's Marxist, but it really is. Just look at it. That's all you have to do is read it. So I would encourage parents to read it, but because you're out of balance right now and because you're not implementing it properly according to the education code. I would also ask that the board request that the superintendent ask that each teacher of that class send home with the kids their materials for the day, give them what they were taught, give them who the speaker was, the video links, everything about it, so they, as parents, they can understand what's happening. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next up is Marla Franz. Sophia Letty will be next.
Hi, I would like to discuss the lack of Zoom for quarantine kids. I have been told there's an impact to our average daily attendance when using Zoom based on the new independent study law in California. And I am so disappointed that this district is putting money from the ADA ahead of what our students need. I can't imagine anyone here would be able to say with a straight face that our kids are better off at home trying to figure out homework assignments on their own versus listening to their teachers teach during class. According to the COVID dashboard last week, we had 67 students at home in full quarantine. I'm sure all of those families are frustrated and now worried how their child will catch up in their classes. High school classes are rigorous. In most cases, material builds upon itself. When they get back into class, they need to learn what they missed while simultaneously doing well with the current material. It's a challenge. My friend sent a letter to the board yesterday, and with her permission, she said I could share her daughter's experience as an illustration. She was put on quarantine the second week of school, and with very little support from the school. Really, she would say none. She came back to 2 Ds and an F and an A in dance. Woo! Her daughter is a senior and a serious student applying to UCs and Ivy Leagues, and has been an incredibly stressful time for this girl to raise her grades to catch up to where she needs to be, so she is not behind with the rest of her classmates. She's a sharp girl with good study habits and motivation. And this could be my daughter, which is why I'm here to argue and fight for all of these kids. Start a Zoom session, point at the ceiling, let the kids listen in. Don't prioritize money. Thank you.
Thank you, Marla. Sophia Letty.
Hi, everybody. My name's Sophia. I'm a senior at Oakmont High School, and I'm a member of Diversify Our Narrative and the Oakmont High School Student Equity Team. We want to speak in favor of the Ethnic Studies course, which has been coming under fire recently from a lot of people in this district. Based on a complete misunderstanding, Ethnic Studies does not contain critical race theory, it does not contain ideas of Marxism, and it is a necessary addition to our course load. Students are taking this course as an elective at my school, and learning about this is important to our student body because students are taking it as an elective. And our student body is more and more diverse every year, and we see more and more students who want to learn how to understand their own privilege and how to make it so that our society is more equitable for everyone. This, in my opinion, is an incredibly brave and noble goal, and I am proud to be part of a student body who shares it with me. And as the school board, I believe that it is your responsibility to help teach students who want to learn. The students of my high school and of many high schools around our district have shown that they want to learn about ethnic studies. We want to keep taking this course. Ethnic studies is not Marxism, it's not critical race theory, it just talks about race and ethnicity in a way that students can understand, and we want to understand it. Racism is an issue that affects each and every one of the students that you as the board are supposed to help us protect and represent. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving this course to our schools. Students are excited to take it, we're grateful that we have it, and please, for the sake of everyone at our wonderfully diverse schools, please keep the course.
Thank you, Sophia. Next up is Chris Stevens, and then Dax Roberts.
Hello, board. My name's Chris, and I have a youth in the district. My topics are, why isn't there any type of release of liability? Because I know the schools are scared of being sued for if a kid dies with COVID. I know many parents here would probably sign a release of liability, releasing their child from any liability if their child gets sick. Another topic is Intercom High School, which is not that far away from here, 20 minutes from my house. There was a high school teacher there in AP history that was teaching within 180 days. It was his job to make the children scared F out of them and make them into revolutionary socialists? What are you guys doing to take protocols so you don't have teachers of this caliber in this district doing these bad things to our children? You know? Or just letting them do what they do? Enlighten me on how you could, change this type of socialism impact, what you guys are doing. You could put that on emails out to the public, whatever, let us know. Don't keep us in the dark. Don't just sit there with, starry-eyed faces looking like you guys are scared. We're here. We want some answers. I know you guys don't have groups like this all the time. Usually there's no one here.
Chris, your time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dax Roberts, followed by Shameen Phillips.
Hello, I'm Dax Roberts. I'm 15 and I'm a sophomore at Wood Creek. I came here tonight to express my feelings towards the quarantining of unvaccinated students. The school is segregating students from the unvaccinated and are rapidly quarantining students that are not vaccinated. I do not show symptoms of COVID. I think we all pretty much know that people who are vaccinated can carry and spread COVID. So what's the difference between the vaccinated and unvaccinated students? I personally find it unfair that the kids who are not vaccinated are losing out on more learning than the kids who are. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dax. Shameen Phillips, followed by Brian Richter.
Hi, let's cut to the chase. Things should be a choice. We live in a country where they should be a choice. Ethnic studies, if she wants to take it, it should be a choice. I don't want my child in it, period. We have history for a reason, and history has always worked just fine. Masks. Masks don't work, and neither does this shot. Facts have been proven by science. Virus isn't transmitted asymptomatically. Masks accomplish nothing because virus particles can get through. Your testing policy for students who are exposed to COVID by a positive classmate is 100% flawed and does not follow the science. Not only are you exposing children to unnecessary tests that will harm them long term, numerous studies have shown that people who have had the virus previously have immunity far better than this shot, far better than anything else. And you guys are not even considering that. Be on the cutting edge of this. Consider the science. There is science to prove this stuff. Antibody positive people, they do not need quarantine, they don't need testing, and they certainly don't need this death shot. You must consider this data, and you must make this a part of your resolutions and COVID policy. I asked you today if you need some facts, I'll send you some facts. But I asked you today as the superintendent, consider this as part of your policy, because kids are missing out on valuable school, and it's not right.
Thank you, Shameen. Brian Richter, followed by Leslie Jamison.
Hello, everybody. I just want to let you know that Antelope High School was supposed to have a girls' water polo team this year. We had too close? Closer? Sorry, there we go. That's what it's supposed to do. Thank you for noticing. Anyway, they were supposed to have this. They had 8 girls, which is more than enough girls to have a team. They put out that they had here's our interest night, and then here's the deadline to have it. That interest night and deadline actually didn't give my 2 daughters the opportunity to get to the doctor to get the athletic clearance before that Monday. And then on that Friday, they canceled it without having any practice. And I did talk to Tino about this. On Monday, he seemed very enthusiastic that we had enough folks and all that good stuff. Unfortunately, I then had to talk to Steve Jones. I talked to him on Tuesday, talked to him on Thursday, talked to him on Friday, and then found out that no, the decision had basically already been made. I went and talked to the district. District talked to the school. School suddenly had done everything they possibly could, even though in talking to the district staff member, Melanie, who's in charge of the athletic, she said that clearly they hadn't done everything they could to show support for this. So I'm seriously disappointed, and I just wanted to share that with you guys tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next up is Leslie Jamison, followed by Cameron. Is it Cameron Hooker?
Hi, my name is Leslie Jamison. I have 4 kids in Eureka and Roseville Union Joint, and I have pulled them all out. They started a new school this year. And I also am the chapter leader for an organization called FAIR, which is Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism. I've spent a great deal of time looking at the ethnic studies, the California ethnic studies, and then also FAIR came out with an ethnic studies curriculum. Nobody is saying that we need to not teach ethnic studies. I'm appealing to common humanity and common sense. The Roseville one is segregating, it's tribalizing, it segregates people. And the FAIR curriculum, I'm going to just read a little bit of what the FAIR curriculum represents. It says the FAIR Story curriculum exposes students to the histories, experiences, struggles, accomplishments, and contributions of Americans of diverse backgrounds. Ours is a fact-based approach to teaching students about racism. It's honest about the failures and shortcomings of our American past and present while recognizing how the struggles and accomplishments of Americans continue to move us closer to our ideals. Students learn to counter racism and intolerance with humanity and compassion. It goes on to talk about how it helps students to confront racism and bigotry, which depend on a dehumanizing emphasis on racial difference, which is what the ethnic studies is. It's dehumanizing on racial difference. It's not balanced. So we need to have a balanced curriculum. I appeal to anybody who wants to know more to come to me to learn more about this curriculum. I have looked at both of them, and it's much, much better. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Cameron Hooker, followed by Lisa Mendenhall.
Hey, my name is Cameron Hooker, and this is my girlfriend, Savannah Horwath. I attend Roseville High School, and she attends Wood Creek High School. We are here tonight to ask for help. Roseville High School has said that dance bids will not be allowed this year because of COVID, as announced on Friday the 3rd. I created a petition that received over 300 signatures in under 24 hours and over 400 within 36 hours. At the moment, it stands at 416 signatures. Also, yesterday the 8th, I figured out that whether dance bids were to be available or not, or a school decision rather than a board decision. While I know that you guys will not be able to override Dr. Richter, I have come to ask for help so that maybe you guys could potentially talk to him and tell him how it's wrong. I emailed Dr. Richter my thoughts on it, and today he got back to me. Some of the points I made were that anyone from anywhere can come to football games without any screening of any sort. Another was that while the CDPH guidelines do say to limit school events, there is absolutely nothing about commingling, which we obviously see occurring at all sports, indoor and outdoor. Another point I brought up was that it's an extensive process to get a dance bid, and I'm sure that if you wanted to add a requirement such as a negative COVID test, then I'm sure people would meet that. I also mentioned and asked how it makes sense to be able to have 100+ people crammed into a student section, but to not be able to bring a significant other to a dance outside on the football field. Finally, I mentioned how we're getting these crucial high school experiences taken away from us. Dr. Richter replied and said that because it's a different type of activity that affects the decision they make. He said, quote, students who are dancing are generally very close to one another face to face, unquote. And that, quote, sporting events have fans facing the same direction on multi-level stands, unquote. Please take a look at the pictures they handed you.
Thank you, Cameron. All right. Next up is Lisa Mendenhall.
Hello, Lisa Mendenhall, Oakmont parent of a junior, and tonight I am wanting to make the board aware of inconsistent messaging as it relates to close exposure in the classroom. At the last board meeting, we learned that it was no longer required when you're on modified quarantine to have to test for the 10-day, 2 times within 10 days. So we learned that it was recommended, not required, right? And today, I received notification that my daughter had been exposed, and the communication stated that it was required to test within the 10 days, 2 times. So again, and this is with masks on, okay? So there's inconsistent messaging going out, and you can imagine parents who are receiving this information now are racing out to go get their kid tested unnecessarily. We got to stop the testing, and we got to get consistency across our messaging and make sure our policies are communicated clearly to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Savannah Horwath.
Hello, my name is Savannah Horwath, and I want to talk about the dress codes. I think that is very sexualizing to young girls in high school, in middle school, in the whole district. I've never once heard a man say, or a boy say that, oh, her shoulder is distracting or her stomach is distracting. I think you're taking away our right to dress how we want to dress, and I think it's very sexualizing, and I really think it has to do with the teachers, and if they feel uncomfortable, then that's their problem, and we should be able to wear exactly what we want to wear. Thank you.
Thank you, Savannah. All right. And that's all we have for public comment on non-agenda items. Thank you all for your public comment. You can always email the board and the district. The board is very good at responding to emails. We hear your comments. We take them very seriously. If you've been attending these board meetings for any length of time, you know our feelings on a lot of this and our conviction in upholding not only safety but choice. And we continue to be in this very difficult time that we call COVID, and my hope is someday we will be through this process. But we do hear you, we listen to you, we respond to emails, and the district will continue to communicate out changes, updates, and going forward. So thank you very much. We'll move on to item 3.6, committee reports. I think the Board Policy Review Committee met, and Mr. Constant, did you have a report?
Yes, thank you. The Policy Committee has met twice recently, the first on April 24th and the second yesterday on September 9th. The items from the September 24th agenda, Policy Committee agenda, are on today's consent agenda. You will see that they are categorized as usual on those that have non-impactful changes, in other words, just either semantics, language, or referencing new code sections, kind of technical changes. And then we also have tonight a number that are new board policies and regulations. These are coming about for a couple of different reasons. One, staff has been working diligently to identify gaps in our board policies and administrative regulations. As you know, we're preparing for our audit by CSBA, and this is part of our pre-audit process to make sure that any identified gaps are addressed as we move forward. So tonight you're going to see board policies on school resource officers, promotion, acceleration, retention, bargaining units, collective bargaining agreements, employee security, and family care and medical leave. Some of them look very repetitive, and they are. It's because we have multiple bargaining units, so there are essentially the same policy 3 times in 3 different sections, because they represent the different classifications of staff that we have. There are some corresponding ARs, administrative regulations, that go along with those. In each of these cases, these memorialize our current practices of the board and the administration. When we see just a brief one about yesterday's meeting, because we're not going to vote on those today, but you will see those in the future. Yesterday's meeting was specific and focused on board policies and administrative regulations that are necessary to have in place before our what's called an FPM visit, which stands for Federal Program Monitoring. And that is the audit, so to speak, of our policies to ensure that we're in compliance with federal legislation and state legislation that directly impacts our funding to the school district. Now, there are a number of those that we've talked about yesterday that there is a difference in policies as recommended by CSBA and policies that are recommended by the California Department of Education. So the work that you'll see in the next time when it comes to our vote at the next meeting are going to be specifically reconciling those differences so that they meet the expectations of the program, federal program monitoring that is going to take place shortly. Now, there is one board policy that you're not going to see on today's agenda, nor as part of the policy committee, the next agenda, and that's the ethnic studies. And now Now, we have had discussions about ethnic studies, and I know that the board has indicated a desire to revisit that. The policy committee.
Mr. Your equity policy you referred to?
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant equity policy. Ethnic studies was mentioned so many times it got driven into my head. So see, we do retain what you say. So the equity policy, we had a pretty robust discussion about that at the policy committee, and the belief there is so much concern and different perspectives on the equity policy, and there is a great variation in even the definition of the term equity, that the committee, in agreement with our staff, believes that it would be best for this board to have a discussion of that policy before a lot of work is put into crafting a new policy. Now, we know anecdotally from the comments that we've heard at these meetings that there are a number of pretty detailed areas of concern with the policy, and we want to make sure those are vetted amongst this group so that we can address it basically once and not have our staff keep revisiting the issue over and over. So we are asking as a policy committee for that to be agendized for a discussion, perhaps in alignment with our priority setting or our retreat or whatever that is we're going to be calling it, more of a discussionary setting where we can really get deep into that. So with that long explanation, you're going to see some stuff here on the consent agenda today. You're going to see some stuff next week related to the FPM visit. We will have staff discuss more about the FPM visit and what that entails and why we are using the language we're using at our next meeting. And then we are going to visit the equity policy as a board to gain input, which we will then take back to the policy committee and craft a policy for subsequent approval. So that is my long-winded report.
Good detailed report, Mr. Constant. And as a point of preference, I would be open to that board policy 415 equity policy as part of a discussion during our retreat vision, goal and vision setting. But that's just my one take. Any other board members wish to question Mr. Constant on the policies or mention anything? Yep. Go ahead.
The first one, thank you for that report. The first one is, you'd mentioned the CSBA audit and the CDE. It's the CSBA audit, the CSBA recommended policies, and the CDE policies. The FPM, how does it relate to the CSBA audit?
Two completely separate functions. The CSBA audit is a full A to Z audit of all of our board policies, what we have that have been approved, how they compare to the CSBA suggested language. It will identify any that we have not yet identified that are missing, where there are gaps in our policy. That will then allow us to reconcile any differences, close any gaps in preparation for putting our policies online in a different format where it'll be easier for people to see them online, and there'll be hyperlinks directly to the associated ed codes and other codes, so there'll be more backup material for both us and the members of the public. The FPM visit is a very focused visit that looks, and it's from the California Department of Education, I believe, and if I'm wrong, someone over there can shake their head. California Department of Education comes in and reviews only those specific policies that are tied to funding on mandated language we must have in order to continue to receive funding.
Thank you. So my question then would be, if there is extraneous CSBA policies that aren't required by the FPM for federal funding or required by CDE, I want those flagged.
Yeah, and there's a sort of another category, and you probably know more about this than me, but for those who are out there listening, almost every one of our board policies and administrative regulations are tied to ed codes. Our state does something, in my mind, that is superfluous and dumb, and that is they set state law, and then they say every board must then adopt these same laws. They don't do that anywhere else in government. They don't adopt a vehicle code and then tell every police department they have to adopt the same vehicle code. So it's a repetitive nature. So our board policies and administrative regulations are designed to be approved by us, to be in compliance with and alignment with the education code and any other codes that may interfere, like the health and safety code or welfare code or any of those things. And those are separate from those that are required for funding. But we will look, and if there's any that we have that we somehow just created and they're not required, we can definitely flag that so that we can then discuss, do we actually even need to have it?
Perfect. So that leads into the 0415, and I agree it needs a much more thorough discussion. And my only thoughts on that would be if there's any practices in the district that are using that policy as a guidepost, that I would like those to be suspended until we have this discussion about the 0415.
So one of the concerns that was raised at the committee meeting, and one of the reasons that the policy committee did not recommend suspension at this point, and Brad, if I'm wrong, again, please jump in, is that there are several aspects of the language that tie into our human resource issues and our anti-discrimination policies related to employment, and the administration believed that we still needed to have those in effect in order for us to operate until we make the wholesale change. Brad, did I get that right?
I'd like a legal opinion on that, but what I'm trying to say is not so much about the policy itself, is that if there's any practices that are using 0415 as the basis to build new practices, then I want those new practices to be suspended until we have the 0415 discussion.
So I think if that's the case, we would have to agendize that for our next meeting, and we could have that discussion.
Does that make sense what I'm saying, though?
I think I understand.
Yeah, so meaning that if they're saying, well,
But
we
it's
have
more
this
important if John understands.
Does that make sense what I'm saying? Those are my thoughts.
Thanks.
And I do want a legal opinion on 0415 because I thought I understood that to be a zero policy being more of a philosophical policy rather than a legal requirement.
Okay.
That's all.
Mr. Huber? So what's the?
I said that you'd say it so much more eloquently.
Well, no, I think you said it very eloquently. I think what you're, Julie, I think what you're talking about is, and I don't know if it needs to actually come before the board for that, but I think what you're talking about is, if there are teachers or if there are staff members who are working on something that is using that policy as a basis for that, they probably, to conserve their efforts and to make sure they're not wasting their time, they probably should wait until they see what the final policy is that we adopt, so that they can then work within that framework. Because if they take the current policy and come up with some program or curriculum or something that is based on our current policy, it may be in effect a waste of time, because they may have to start from scratch once they see what our new policy is. I'm not suggesting that necessarily would be the case. There may be components they could use, but it would sort of make logical sense with all of the tasks that staff and teachers have to do to focus on other things at the moment while we get the policy dialed in to what we would like it to be, so that once we do go live with the policy, then of course the teachers can operate within that framework and not go outside of the bounds of what we've established as the policy. Right?
Well said.
Okay. And so I don't know. So John, if that needs to be on an agenda, great. If you think it can be done without it, fine. But if we need to actually make that a vote, okay. I think you know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I got the direction.
Add that one of the main reasons that we're going down this approach is all of you know, but the public may not be aware, because of the Brown Act, only the two of us have had the opportunity to discuss this. And we think it would be foolhardy for us to go ahead and craft a policy without knowing what the three of you would like to see in it in more detail. Otherwise, I think we would just get in a circular, dog chasing his tail type of thing as we try and get it. It'd be better for us just to hash it out and then work to that.
Then I'll ask, what's the desire of the board? Do you want to bring it back in 2 weeks, or are we good? That's the only way to I guess, put it on hold, or can it wait till October when we have a thorough discussion?
Personally, I think the recommendation to have it as a bigger part of our discussion and our visioning is a good place where it belongs, because this has been part of that policy relates to visioning sessions in the past, and we have to revisit those. And so I think I'm in agreement that we can do it during our board visioning session in the whenever we have.
Okay. But
That's how I feel.
I'm hearing a conversation about not rescinding it, but putting it on hold, which would probably have to come back to the board.
Well, the policy's not on hold, just anything using that policy as a basis for instruction or further probably should be put on hold, so that there is no need to go back and rework anything.
I think John's going to take a look at it and figure out, do we need to put that on the agenda or not?
Okay.
And so if there's some logical reason to put it on the agenda, we'll have it, and if not, then we can
just wait till
then they know what our intent is, and they know what we're going to be doing going forward, and so I think that's okay.
Great. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Heidi.
All right, consent agenda. All matters listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion with a roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless the Board of Trustees, audience, or staff request specific items to be removed from the consent agenda for separate action. Any item removed will be considered after the motion to approve the consent agenda. I am removing one item from the consent to the action item, and that's 4.8, which is the stadium support buildings design and construction administration fee proposal. And you'd like to move 4.9, which is the F3 Fagan Friedman Full Thrust LLP agreement for legal services. And I will open it up to the public. Also has an opportunity, if they wish to pull an agenda item, come to the podium for further discussion. To state your name again, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mike Wixon. I just want to know how I would even know that I would want to comment on this item after the discussion. It wasn't agendized particularly to the items you spoke to. I didn't even know it was on the agenda. So I would ask you, re-agendize it, put it for public comment, specifically to what you're speaking to.
Equity policy.
It's hard. It was hard. Talking about everything you spoke to as a board, specifically, whether it was equity, whatever, I don't think people really have an idea that you're even talking about these policies, because they're not agendized specifically, and you're speaking to specific policies.
And we're not taking action on any of these items.
Yeah, we're not
speaking to specific policies that are on consent, but now you're speaking to them, and without opening it to public comment. So you have opened it to public comment, but I would have, as somebody coming in to hear this, I have no idea this is what you're speaking to. Because I looked at the agenda and I didn't see anything that would clue me in. So I would like to have an opportunity to speak to the board at some point.
We're not addressing the equity policy in consent or an action item.
Regardless,
that's all I'm saying.
Just as the way you're going about what you're doing, what I'm saying is you didn't agendize the item so that the public would even know that you're specifically speaking to any particular board policy. And I think you should list those so that as people...
Item 4.12, they're agendized with all the supporting documents.
Okay, I read the agenda, I didn't see those. So I would have to click and go in and see it. The agenda doesn't list it specifically, and that's what I'm asking for. So if you, in the future, could you please just list those specifically, so as a person in the public, we have an idea of what you're doing. I don't have to drill down to each item to really see what's going on. It's helpful. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Mike. All right. Any other comments on the consent agenda? Seeing none, board, do we have a motion? Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Constant, a second by Ms. Hall. Barbara, will you take the roll?
Yes, Pete Constant, Heidi Hall,
Yes.
Julie Hirota, Scott Huber,
Yes.
and Andrew Tagg.
Yes, consent agenda is approved by a vote of 5-0. Thank you. We'll move on to information matters. 5.1, we have a school presentation tonight from Independence High School. And Principal Ross Fernandez.
All right. Good evening. I'd like to introduce Denise Burns, the counselor of Independence High School, and I'm Ross Fernandez, principal of Independence. Since I became a trailblazer a little over a year ago, I've been asked more times than I can count, what is Independence High School and who do you serve? So tonight, Denise and I are going to introduce everyone to Independence High School, our core values, the multitude of forward-thinking options for families, and we'll show a glimpse of the future impact IHS is going to have on the district infrastructure as a whole. But to understand the current IHS, we need to start with its origin and why we pride ourselves as trailblazers. There we go. All right. So, challengers of the status quo who have a vision for the future are called trailblazers. IHS's first trailblazing moment started with books being transported in the trunk of Ona's car as she conducted home visits to personalize the learning experience for students over 30 years ago. The trailblazer mentality to push the boundaries of possibilities for students is still our guiding principle. COVID is the virus that has knocked the world upside the head for almost 2 years. No one was ready for it, as no one is ever truly ready for big challenges. But challenging situations can lead to transformative opportunities. Because of COVID, IHS has to convert a fully on-ground school to a blended online school. Our staff also knew the typical on-ground supports were going to have to be adjusted, since this was going to be a new approach for both students and staff. But the staff embraced the challenge and risk and asked the question, how can we use the situation to embrace the future? Basically, how far can we stretch the boundaries of options and services to families? The foundational changes of IHS were made last year, and we have student data from that first year of implementation. It's all about the student data. What we found out is that students are pretty good in this new digital age when the supports are there. The data you are seeing is last year versus the previous 3 years. 9th grade credit growth increased 318%. 10th grade credit growth increased 384%. 11th grade credit growth increased 196%. And 12th grade credit growth increased 115%. Now, our curriculum by law has to be as rigorous as CompSci on-ground curriculum. We didn't lower the standards last year because we didn't have to. Students taking the after-school credit recovery classes passed at a 217% higher rate than previous years. We were the first school to run the universal screener last year. Students took it 3 times throughout the year. One of the results was school support. 97.7% of IHS students gave high marks appraising the caring and helpful nature of one's relationship with teachers. What does all this mean? That there is a future for blended online learning options in districts, because under the right guidance and support, students thrive. It's also where the real world is heading, with so many companies converting to aspects of remote work. The next question is how? Well, that begins with an easy answer. IHS is loaded with talented educators. They are caring innovators who are stretching the boundaries of possibilities for students and RJUHSD through first instruction, student options, and supports. There's too many to mention, but some of the innovations are fully adopting a UDL and project-based learning in all courses for first instruction, pioneering an instructional coaching model with Carol Pryor that's already cranking out the results. Danny Scharberger and Stacy Sanders started experimenting with aeroponic growth towers to teach students biology, but with the added benefit of linking 12 towers together, we'll begin growing healthy food for salad bars within a year. Tom, Steve, and Carol are adopting both virtual reality learning tools and UC Davis's robotics C-STEM to begin using robotics and computer programming to enhance the real-world learning of math. PE students have athletic bags they take home which includes exercise equipment and Fitbits, and Melissa runs the class like the mirror and its approach to personal training. We have full motion capture suits coming in from Denmark for Natalie Robbins' animation classes. Kristen Patton has already hit the ground running, enhancing our student government with our first student and staff celebration week just around the corner. The 4 primary reasons the results went up during COVID, as stated already, are the staff and first instruction innovations. But we also focus on more than just academics. We develop the whole student through mentorship in classes like advisory. IHS was the first to adopt advisory, which is popular with the students and parents and is invaluable in preparing students for the real world. We approached it as a team effort to support students. Teachers focus on relationships and time management. Wellness focuses on monthly lessons on social and emotional skills, and counseling focuses on monthly lessons on college and career. Last but not least is the culture. We set high expectations, but we personalize so much that we have an opportunity to know our students, their hobbies, their aspirations, their dreams. Because of our unique environment that we established, we get to celebrate students for who they are. In summary, under the right conditions and guidance, blended online learning is highly successful with the new generation of students. It's part of the future. Denise is now going to explain IHS's boundary-stretching approach to high school options and services to students and families. When she's showing the details, the best way to understand IHS is think of us as the high school version of college.
Okay, so we have 3 pathways at Independence High School, and as Mr. Fernandez mentioned, we are very similar to what I think you would see at a college, that type of schedule. We also teach our students skills like knowing how to get to class on time without a bell ringing, knowing how to manage their time when they're not in class. So if they're going to a class 2 days a week, managing that time like you would on a college schedule. So our UC A through G path is very similar to what you would see at the comprehensive sites. Our students are prepared to enter a community college at college level so that they're not taking remedial coursework or going directly into a four-year university. Our CTE diploma path can combine and include A through G, but it allows students to take career technical education courses either through the community college or taking courses at a comprehensive site or CTE programs that we offer at our site. And then the early college diploma path is very popular. Many students like to come to our school because we offer the flexibility for students to take more courses at the local community colleges. We are moving towards the middle college model for our school. We would like to move in that direction, which actually allows students to work towards 60 transferable units, an associate degree, or a certificate while they're still in high school. Okay. These are our different scheduling options that we have currently at Independence. You can see at the top in blue, this is our synchronous schedule. So students may choose this option if they're transitioning into independent study. They don't really want to go just 2 days a week. They'd like to stay on a more consistent schedule like what maybe they had at the comprehensive site. 4 days a week online. So you'll see in the example at the top, this student would have English Tuesday through Friday from 8 to 9, and then math for an hour 4 days a week, and then their elective and a health class. We do have Hub, which is our intervention day. We don't do a period every day like at the comprehensive sites. We do our Hub intervention time all day on Mondays. So this allows students to catch up if they maybe missed class for a reason, or maybe they were struggling on a particular unit the week before. They can come in on Monday, remediate, and then be ready to start the week again. We also use our Hub time for enrichment, so that's when our student government class meets. We also plan, when COVID kind of clears away, we hope soon, to use that day for visits to museums, college visits, take students off campus, allow students to experience things outside of our campus. Our blended program that you see below is the traditional independent study program. So students come 2 days a week. They can either Zoom or come in person, and then they're working on the work independently throughout the week, other than the 2 days. They are required to come for those 2 days for instruction. So our teachers instruct on those 2 days as they do in the synchronous model. But this allows students that flexibility throughout their week. We have a lot of students who like to work part-time, take college courses, participate in internship programs, and this allows them that flexibility. I like this model because our students can also mix and match. So we have students who maybe struggle in math and want to take more traditional 4-day-a-week schedule with math, but for English, they want to come in 2 days a week for that course. So they can kind of make their own personalized schedule between these two options. Now, our college course options, we really partner with Sierra College, but we have students who take college courses at the local community colleges, also in the Los Rios district. And these are just a sample of some of the courses that our students like to take. We do try to tailor their schedule around the courses that they're taking at the college if they're taking those in person. And so far, that's worked out very well. We do want to move towards the middle college model because that will allow us to streamline the enrollment process and have a little bit more input into when our students are taking those courses to make that work with our schedule. Okay. So this is an example of what we do when we enroll a student. So to enroll at Independence High School, students fill out, or parents fill out, the interest form on our website. And then they come in for a meeting with us so that we can give them more information about the program, talk about specific supports that a student may need, and then we select courses. So you can see the social science example. For instance, an 11th grader coming in could choose regular U.S. history, they could take AP U.S. history, or they could take History 17B at Sierra College. Social science for a senior, also they could take AP, or they can take political science at Sierra College to replace government, or they could take economics at Sierra College to replace economics. And also options, obviously, through the Los Rios Community College District would also give them credit. We also use Ingenuity and BYU for foreign language options. This gives our students more options for foreign language. So you can see the many options our students have for a foreign language. And then our college enrollment has really increased, as you can see. Is that right? We're up 3,100%. So we have so many students that are taking advantage of this and taking classes at the community college this year. It's really wonderful to see. And we plan to have more students taking courses in the spring term. Okay. And then now we want to show you this video from our student, Kate Benevento. She's a current 10th grader. Last year, as a 9th grader, she designed our logo, our new logo. So in her art and design class, she is an amazing student, and she's also part of our student government. Okay.
Hello, my name is Kate Benevento, and I'm a sophomore at Independence High School. Students come here for a number of reasons, ranging from anxiety to needing an alternative schedule change. Personally, I believe Independence is an incredible and rigorous school that has provided me with several resources and opportunities to be the best student I can be. From the dynamic and flexible student government program to the countless electives, students are able to explore their passions freely. Independence allows each student to have a sense of individuality. The structure of the school promotes skills such as self-discipline, responsibility, and perseverance. The community here is like no other and constantly encourages everyone to do their best. During these uncertain times, Independence is still advancing and inspiring each student for the better. Thank you for all the support, and go Trailblazers.
So that is the end of our presentation. Welcome to Independence High School.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Principal Fernandez. Board members, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I actually want to. I want to go back and make sure I understand something. Can you put up that slide that has the middle? Talk about the 3 slide 2 right there. Nope. Right there. This middle college school. If I understand this correctly, this is where individuals can take college courses, get both college credit and high school credit at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's possible. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's possible that someone could graduate with a high school diploma and an associate's degree on the same day.
Yes.
I don't think I'm overstated. I've been this idea. I thought we could implement this more than a decade ago when I was actually at my niece's graduation in Utah, and she did the same thing. She walked across the stage. She got a diploma from high school and an associate's degree same day. She happened to select a 5-year major, so she was only at the university for 3 years. But I started doing the math in my head and adding up how much money she saved by doing that. She cut off 2 years of college because the first day she walked into college, she was a junior. Now add up 2 years of tuition, 2 years of living expenses, all of that. Pick a number, $50,000, whatever it is. But what really happens, at least in my mind, you'll always be a first-year engineer, a first-year whatever your career path is. What you've done is you will have added, for students to take advantage of this, you will have added 2 years on the back end of their employment, which are typically the highest earning years. So this program is probably worth, to individuals who take advantage of it, to our students who take advantage of it, probably $500,000.
I think the other part about it too is you think about the number of students who actually go to colleges and they switch their majors all the time. Because in high school, you don't always necessarily focus on the career, and that's sort of what we're doing here. Every student actually comes in, the first thing we do is actually have them take a career assessment. We help them navigate through a series of electives, and we actually encourage them to start to explore. Because if they're going to college while they're in high school, they still get to utilize all the high school supports. So we're there to help navigate where a lot of times college kids struggle those first few years. We're able to sort of help coach them up and navigate through that process. But I think the other part that is the most valuable thing is we get feedback. So as the students are taking the college classes, they get to tell us what they struggled in, and we actually then can start adjusting our high school courses and stuff in order to help prepare more students for those classes and stuff.
I think it's fantastic. And for anybody that missed it, or for anyone who's listening to the sound of my voice or the internet or wherever it's going, if you want to, essentially get an extra $500,000 in the pocket of your kids, this program can do it. They can graduate high school with an associate's degree same day. Awesome.
Ross, how many students do you have enrolled?
As of today, I think when we left campus, we were 311, but we're getting enrollments every single day.
Continually. In a typical year, pre-COVID, what was,
I think when we originally started, even for this, I think you'd start the year out at 90. You would probably be about 160 now, and then we would probably end the year at around 230, 240. We started the year at about 255, I think, and then we're just getting students pretty much every single day.
Well, and I've had a little experience with Independence and Miss Burns, and I've had a chance. Debbie Letary did a great job. I was always a fan of Independence and what they did and how they captured the students' demographic out there, and just was a perfect fit. And I saw it firsthand, and the care and the dedication of the counselors, the teachers, and I think you've done a fantastic job stepping in there for Miss Letary and taking it to the next level. So appreciate the presentation tonight.
Yeah, and we actually remodeled the inside and stuff all last year. So we encourage come and visit. We give you a tour. You can meet all the staff and stuff. They're absolutely fantastic.
Last time I was there, it was pretty empty. A lot of furniture.
Oh, you should see it all now. Yeah,
away.
it's pretty good.
Well, thank you.
All right,
Any other board members?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Does the CTE diploma path include internships?
They're going.
because of this, just because you have to be enrolled at the community. Oh. I just think it would be remarkable if there was a way to do credit, CTE credit as an internship for real world experience and head off into the, some kind of career development. I don't know if it's possible, but right. Good answer. Good answer. Thank you.
Pete.
Just want to say thanks. I really appreciate the information, and I do have to get out there, so I'll be getting a hold of you in the next week or so to come out. But I just want to follow up on something that Scott said, and I think it would behoove us to have a future agenda item where we spend some time deep diving in academic enrichment and dual enrollment, because it's not only that tail end, but I can tell you I have 2 daughters that are graduating each a year early from universities. I'm going to save about $45,000 myself next year by not having to send them that year 4. And I have a sophomore, before she even started sophomore year, has already got college units. And I think we need to talk about it so that we completely understand it. But I think we need to make sure all of our parents understand it, all of our students understand it, because we have an incredible asset that we give our kids, or we have it out there. We need to connect them all to it. We need to learn more about it. We need to daylight it more at all of our schools. You guys are doing a great job with it. We got to get it everywhere. And I know April is really into this. So I think it's something we should talk about. Have a deep dive sometime that works for staff.
Great. The plans for those $45,000.
It's my retirement trip now.
One other question on the students. Are they able, I know previously they weren't able to play athletics or do band.
They can partake. They can partake in anything at the comp site, so they can do performing arts teams. They can do the athletics. They can still take courses at the actual comp sites.
Perfect. Any other questions, comments?
Told me that over and over how much I loved your school, and I would come here if I could. I've told lots of people about it. I think it's so unique and special. So thanks for coming and sharing about it.
All right, everyone have a good evening.
Thank you. Next item is 5.3, learning update with our Assistant Superintendent of Ed Services. Oh, I'm sorry. How can I forget Miss Fork? Oh my.
It was raining about 5 minutes ago. And only for about 5 minutes. But it was raining for a little bit.
I was on the campus of Roseville High School, and I stopped by your classroom, but you were not there, so I did make an effort.
No, I was subbing. I was subbing for a teacher.
All right.
So I was doing my due diligence. Okay. So we have begun negotiations, and we continue to look forward to our collegiate working relationship with the district in terms of our negotiations. We would like to remind the board that the teachers and other staff are the backbone of this district, and its reputation is built on the staff hired to work here. We hire talent and are able to do the kinds of work this district does, which draws parents and students here because of the professionalism we embody and exhibit. And I think the really awesome thing that we just saw with Independence showed how these teachers that you guys are hiring are drawing these kids and how we're doing revolutionary things is really cool. We look forward to negotiations this year and the mutual respect and admiration we hold for one another as we move through negotiations this year. That is it for me tonight. Short and sweet.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Fork.
Thank you. And Pete's going to come hang out with me tomorrow.
All right, now 5.3, our learning update with our Assistant Superintendent of Ed Services, Dr. Moore.
Thank you, President Tagg and board members. This is the much anticipated learning update, which will be a series of updates that we'll be providing you. And I'll be inviting Jen Layton, our Executive Director of Learning Support Services, to join me in this presentation as well. We'd like to start with an update on a few different data sets. I know the question has been, how are our students doing? How did they do last year? And so we have several data sets to look at today. They are simply examples and not the whole picture. The first one we'd like to share is 10th grade PSAT. And let's see, there we go. All right, so the PSAT test is not a percentage test, it's a score, and they give us the data in the average score. And so what we have and what we'll have for each of these data sets is the last 4 years, so that we can see how did we do last year, which was a pandemic year, how did we do the year before, which was partial, and then the 2 prior years to give us an example of what would it have been like before pandemic. And surprisingly, but not so surprisingly, because of the amazing work of our teachers that we've been hearing about and our students, our 10th grade scores actually went up in both English and math, very slightly. But again, when you see we were fairly flat for the last few years, we went up slightly. So we did not see a downturn in these. And here you see the math also went up slightly. And we tend to go up and down a little bit each year. So there's a variation that is typical. And so this is a snapshot from last year, 10th grade. Now we'd like to switch gears to 11th grade snapshot from last year. Now this one will be a little bit different. It's the state test that we give in the spring, but those actual data scores are still embargoed. So what we're comfortable sharing with you today is just the percentage up and down, but we're not showing actual scores until the state releases that statewide. And we do not have a timeline yet for when that will be. And so here's an example of English language arts. So this would be our 11th graders the last few years. Now, last year we had a large number of our students take the test, great work by staff and families who participated in that. The prior year, the state did not have testing, and so that's why you see that gap. We wanted to show that. And in the previous years, we've had ups and downs. So sometimes we'll go up 2 or down 5, up 1, and what we experienced from that was down 2% in English. So not that surprising. In fact, we're basically holding on pretty solid to that 11th grade learning, and that assesses students based on 11th grade standards, what they would be expected to achieve. And we're holding steady in English. In math, we did see more of a drop. It was 5.5% drop overall, and it is a drop for all student groups. There was not a lot of variation. It was a struggle for all of our students. And in looking at some of these data sets, we've invited conversations. I'm happy to go deeper with each of you individually if you would like to. Had a great conversation recently with Trustee Hirota, and she asked some really poignant questions around how do we know what's working and what do our teachers notice, because we have some hard data, just at points in time, but we also know that our professional teachers are in the classrooms daily with our students, and what are they noticing. And so what I'd like to share is the grade data, and you've seen pieces of these as well. And so as we look at the grades, we're noticing some trends, and our teachers are helping us to interpret, and these will be ongoing conversations. But overall, we have increased the number of F grades about double. And if you think about it, this past year, we show here 11% Fs. The prior year, which was when we did the hold harmless, we only saw 5% because we were holding students harmless. We didn't penalize them when we had that emergency closure. And the years before, we were fairly steady at 6%. So if we look at 6% as what might be typical, we almost doubled that in our overall grades. And then when we look at it by English and math, which is what we've been looking at, we see a little bit different. So there's that double in English from 6% to 12%. And in math, even more so. But math has been a struggle for us. So it's 16%, but before it was 15%. It's that ongoing struggle. And so I wanted to share a little bit of what our teachers were sharing with us in understanding. So we asked, it was a very short survey.
we had about a third of our English teachers and about a third of our math teachers participate, which statistically is pretty good and representative of what's going on. And out of the 28 English teachers that participated, 54%, slightly over half, said that the students in their classes, what they've noticed in the first month of school, is students need about the same amount of support as they've needed historically. Which is, do they need more, less, significantly less? And 54% said they need about the same. And then the other 46% said about some more support than what we've seen in the past. But as we've been talking with our math teachers, that's a different story, because if you think about it, we held students harmless, then we had last year of pandemic. So the students who've been struggling in math, it's adding up year after year. And so our math teachers, and the 26 of them that participated in our survey, 56% said they needed some more support in math, and 28% said they needed significantly more support in math than what they've seen in previous years. Only 16% that said it was the same. So we're looking at 84% of our teachers reporting that our students are needing some or significantly more support in math. And anecdotally, as we're exploring and diving in, it's that compounding nature of math that we really need to dive into and support more fully. So I'm going to pause here. We've shown those 3 data sets, and then we're going to jump in a moment. Jen's going to share what are we doing about it, but what questions might you have about the data before we move on? Yes, please.
I just want to make sure if we could go to the slide where it has the CAS math scores on it, make sure I understand that correctly. So does that indicate that the RJUHSD baseline has been decreasing year over year for the past, well, 1, 2, 3, 4 years without 2020 being in there?
Yes.
So we're continuing to go down,
Yes.
even with all the math efforts that, which my colleagues probably know that have been put in. And for you, for the two of you, math has been an emphasis from this board. Well, the district, forever probably, but with specific goals and objectives since I've been on the board for 5 years. So. That's not to say that everybody isn't trying their hardest at all. It's just the trend is something going on.
I would say that a 0.5% or 0.2% is almost nothing statistically.
Right, but we're
so
not
it's
going up.
flatlining, but you're
We're
right,
not
we are
going up.
not going up, which is what we would want to be seeing.
And I think there's a tremendous amount of effort from the entire district and all the PLTs in every school trying to really work hard together. I mean, last year and a half, the same thing, but yeah. Anyway, I just want to make sure I understood that slide correctly. Thank you.
Other questions?
Yes, I have one question. If you can go to the PSAT graph.
Gentlemen, could you help? It's having trouble. Maybe we can move back a few slides. There we go. Math or English, sir?
I don't think it really matters because they're about the same for the question that I have. My concern is less the top variation, but how many kids are taking the PSAT. Because the 12% decline that we had, I believe it was, well, my math is not being good right now, 15% decline we had in the participants of taking the test is most likely to be the kids who are most frustrated with their learning. Because I'll tell you, like my son, who many of you may have remembered, he came here and told us what a crappy job we were doing, because he completely disengaged and then he did not take the PSAT. So I just think that's important for us to keep in mind how this might have been different had we kept the 80+% of participation in the test. And I noticed that was the same percentage we had back in 17-18, not sure why it was low that year, but I think one of the things that might help me reconcile the numbers is getting a longer perspective of the number of our students that take it, because statistically it makes a difference.
and what the outcomes are. I don't know what that means yet, but I think it's just something that we should be looking at when we look at this data.
Agreed.
Thanks.
Didn't that shift happen in 2018 where all students were eligible to take or start taking it, where in the years before it was not all students were taking it?
I'll have to check exactly what year we
Is that
started.
correct? That's what Barbara's nodding
Yes.
her head, yes. I recall there being a shift, right? When all of a sudden all 10th graders started taking it. It was right around that time. So that is my best guess, is that 2017, 2018. So if you could verify, it was self-selected back then, and I would guess that it was self-selected again and more self-selected in 2020. I'm guessing.
Without all the students on our campuses, because we know we didn't have 100% on campus, it was a little trickier, but we can absolutely dive into what were some of those other factors last year that led to that decreased number of students.
Quick question. I don't want this to go too complex, but have we worked with the feeder districts at all in terms of kids coming into the high school and addressing gaps that might be happening because of Common Core math? And just speaking for myself as a parent with a 5th, 6th, and 9th grader, I told my principal straight up when my kids were home during COVID, like, by the end of this, they're going to be doing math the way that I know how to do math. Because as parents, I mean, at least speaking for myself, we did not learn Common Core math. So I feel like so much of it is coming from the fact that parents cannot help their children the way that our parents could help us. And I try to help my own littles with 5th grade math, and I'm like, why are they teaching it this way? You know, and I try to help them, and I have to teach them the way that I know how to do it. So I'm almost wondering if there's a way that we can help the parents. I mean, it sounds silly, but help the parents of 5th, 6th, and 7th graders help their kids with math at home. I've had to send mine to Mathnasium to get tutoring because I feel as a parent unequipped. So I'm just wondering if there's a link between the decreasing math scores and when Common Core started. I don't really remember when Common Core started, so it's a long question, but.
And we can look into some of the bigger trends as well as a follow-up. But yes, to the question about working with our partner districts or our feeder districts, I have already begun conversations with each of our feeders, and we have collectively identified math as one of our priority areas to work on together. And we have a rich history of our math teachers from each of the districts working together in professional development and setting goals. And so we're looking forward to reviving those great partnerships now that we're back and can talk about math a little bit more than maybe some other subjects. Yes.
One more thing about the math, and this is kind of going off of what Heidi was saying, is do we, I thought there was kind of like a iReady assessment at the end of 8th grade and also at the beginning of 9th grade to identify the preparedness for incoming students. I think there was a belief that there was a gap in where the handoff was, and then it was like, no, there is no gap, or nobody's, I don't know. So I'm wondering if you can find out, or maybe the universal screener has something in it.
It does.
That will do that.
That is a great segue, if I may, to turn it over to Jen Layton, because that's part of what we're doing now and our next steps. So, but if we don't answer your question, let's bring it back. But I'm going to turn it over to Jen to share the fun part.
Hello there. So, I don't generally like to read long quotes, but in that survey that she referenced, one of the math teachers I thought summarized it quite beautifully and eloquently, and it was almost exactly what I had wanted to put on my slide, and it actually was a bit of a repeated theme. So I wanted you to see this, and I will quickly read through it. So the question was, what types of supports would be helpful to bridge the gap and help your students access your course curriculum? She says, the past 3 terms have provided students with a different math journey. No fault on anyone, but the journey hasn't been the same. The first several weeks were particularly difficult. However, I feel like we are getting to a point where students are beginning to build their confidence back and are finding success in the math they are currently learning. At GBHS, we are offering extra help in spades, Grizz time and after school with both teachers and peer tutors. So simply saying we need more after school support isn't it. Honestly, I believe what students really need is protected class time that has been specifically designed by the teacher and the PLT to be an understanding space where students are able to revisit past math concepts while also learning the new concepts. The phrase "not yet" is super powerful right now. Teachers need to rethink what is absolutely necessary and allocate more time for student engagement and interaction. Rushing through topics simply because that's what we've always done is the wrong mindset right now. Helping students improve their mathematical knowledge is just as important as helping them believe, once again, that they are mathematicians. It has taken a lot of patience, repetition, encouragement, hugs, acceptance of the journey students have had without being accusatory, and trust that we will get students to where they need to be. Now, who wouldn't want that attitude from their child's teacher? I thought that was just so eloquent. So where we are right now. So these are the things we know that promote learning. Number 1, a positive relationship, feeling safe, affirmed, and deeply engaged within a supportive community of learners. And that last quote just exemplified that. Creating connections between what students already know and what they're learning that creates confidence for them that they can bridge over to that new learning. Physical activity, joy, and opportunities for self-expression. Learning has to be fun. The classroom does have to have joy in it. Students' perceptions of their own abilities to influence learning. And again, it's that confidence that they can get the help they need and that they can eventually learn what they need to learn. Here's a quote from an English teacher. The only thing I have noticed is that students are not as used to sitting still without distractions as they were pre-COVID. Proactively teaching the behaviors we expect to see in class, giving students chances to practice that behavior, and offering specific praise and regular feedback helps a lot. And responding to unexpected behavior with grace and the perspective of these are simply unmet skills is also really helpful for students. That came up a lot in the survey of teachers just saying, hey, we just have to remember what it feels like to be in school. So, what are we doing right now? What are our current intervention programs? We have support classes. We do have a math sidecar course at every one of the sites. Several of the sites have classes called Positive Power, and in those classes they teach AVID-like strategies, they teach study skills, they sit beside those kids and do tutor them to help them be successful. Counselors identify who needs to be in that class. So I know at least 3 of our campuses are offering this course. Tutoring programs. I think all sites have after-school tutoring. There's also one program in particular that I know pushes student tutors in to courses during the day, their math courses, and then after school, those same tutors are available. And so the tutors have the context of the class and got to hear what the teacher said that day. Expanded credit recovery. You already heard Ross talk about how many students had taken credit recovery courses at his site. Also, many of our comprehensive sites are offering at least 1 credit recovery class, if not 2, within their master's schedule for those students who didn't quite make it the first time and need a different experience. Finally, embedded intervention. Every single one of our comprehensive sites does have a 27-minute period, either after first period or second period, where students can go and get the help they need or catch up on homework. So these are what we have going on right now, and now we need to figure out what's working and what's not. So where are we going? So we like to think of it in terms of accelerating learning. Let's bridge to the learning that we need. Let's not spend so much time going back and filling holes that we don't necessarily need. What do we need to be able to access the curriculum that we need for the next step and for success beyond high school? Well, I think we need to continue with our high expectations. So much can be done by expecting students to bring their best and supporting them. Prioritize our standards. We don't need to teach everything. Let's identify what's most important. That first quote said right there. Let's not just teach things that we've always taught just because we've always taught them. Third, we're going to assess for access. And Ms. Hirota, I think you brought this up about a screener, and I'll talk about it on the next slide. But we're not assessing to track kids or to say, you're not strong enough to be in this level class, I need to send you back. We're assessing to figure out what do we need to address and support so that you can access what we're teaching in this course that you belong in right now. Professional development based on what teachers want and need. Those closest to the work know what they need, and we need to support them and listen to their voices and involve them in that professional development. And finally, collaboration with all stakeholders. It takes all of us. It takes teachers, students, and their parents. We all have to kind of, you know that old saying that I hate to say again, but you know, it does take a village, and we've all got to work together, and we have to keep the kids at the center. So where are we going? Well, yes, we do feel like, and there is a nice grant available, and it's written into the grant, the Extended Learning Opportunity Grant, for us to pay for a screener in English and math in the Curriculum and Instruction Department within Ed Services. We've been meeting with vendors and looking at different screeners. We've narrowed it down to 2. We have a group of 25 English and math teachers meeting us Monday the 20th for an hour, and they're going to help us by providing input on these last 2 that we feel are very good. And we want to have the teachers buy-in on all of this, and so we're excited for that day to talk through all of this and for what the information that eventually will come our way. This is very similar to the common assessments that we've been working on for years so that we can measure growth between courses. Continue supporting targeted student groups, again, having our eye on our at-risk students and keeping the math sidecar and the positive power classes and the targeted tutoring. Those are important things that we need to continue to evaluate. And then most importantly, as I've said, monitor the progress and efficacy of all of our interventions and not just continue to do them because we always have, but to look at the data and figure out if it's working. So that's what we've got for you. And at this point, if you have any further questions, we are here to answer.
Any questions, board members?
Questions, I'll wait.
All right. Again, if you want to speak to any items on the agenda, please fill out a speaker card. Go ahead. Ms. Karen, come on up. But yeah, for any agenda items, just fill out a speaker card.
Good evening. My name is Karen Combest. I have a sophomore. She's not a sophomore anymore. Oh boy, she's a junior at Oakmont High School. And the other night we were watching the news, and she asked me to turn it off because she said, "I can't watch any more of this COVID stuff. And if our schools close down for whatever reason, I'm going to let you move me out of the state." Now, my friends will tell you that Lauren has been a staunch, you are not leaving California, you're staying here. But she's like, I cannot do distance learning again. So I'll just put another plug in. Please keep our schools open no matter what happens on September 15th. But I did want to address learning loss. I wasn't really planning to speak today, believe it or not. And I just want to say that on the PSAT score, I do think it's not comparing apples to apples. I think it was on campus, so a lot of the kids who weren't engaged didn't take the test. So I agree with that. I will say, as just personally, I'll just give my personal experience, I expected my daughter to have a greater increase in her PSAT score than she did. So I know she had a learning loss, period. So that's our experience. And I say that because I know what my son did, and my daughter had the same exact classes that he had, 3 years apart. So I know there's a difference. Then I'll also talk a little bit about intervention. And I know we're not talking about COVID anymore because there's no significant changes. However, there was a significant change in intervention, at least at Oakmont High School this week. Students are no longer allowed to go to their needed class. So if they have to stick with their priority period, and I think most in admin understand what that means. So if my daughter needs help in math, she can't necessarily go there until it's her priority period. So if she has a test tomorrow and she needs help in that class, she can't go there today. And it's because of contact tracing, and I respect that that's a challenge. But COVID is still impacting our students in that particular action. And if she wanted to go to math 4 days a week and for a Friday test, she can't do that. So I would challenge that that's continuing to affect learning loss. I'd also just say that there was a change in honors pre-calc and regular pre-calc this year. So they've taken those two classes and they've put them together. And, I think there's lots of benefits for that. But what I'll say is I know my daughter's going to learn less pre-calc this year than my son did. And the reason I say that is because she's telling me herself they're going really slow to accommodate everyone in the class, to make sure everyone's coming along at the same exact time, learning at the same rate. She was done with her stuff in the unit, she went ahead, and she started to lose interest. And I don't know if that's learning loss to you, but to me, that is. So I think I applaud Trustee Hirota's request to have this every board meeting, and I applaud the efforts of the administration in doing whatever they can, but that's a personal experience so far. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. Michelle Peterson.
Hi there, Michelle Peterson, senior at Oakmont, and I was not planning on speaking either, but this did come up because it was just something that kind of bugged me. My daughter did great, amazing. She also had her feet on campus from October through the whole year. She got straight A's. I was absolutely ecstatic. I mean, who wouldn't be ecstatic with straight A's? Except as I did open up her CASP testing from her junior year, very shocked. Does not reflect a straight A student, is all I can say right there. So to me, there's a learning loss, and what I'm fearful for is this is her senior year. She's doing fine right now. She's doing great. That her spring semester, which comes with a class that she challenged herself with, AP Stats, could possibly bring her down. I don't know what that does. Now I've got to take a credit recovery class for something. I don't know. I'm very concerned, and my daughter is as well, because she plans on graduating and doing it hopefully with honors like her brother did, and all of that goes along with it. So it is a concern. Learning loss is huge, and I think if you look at, I also know from my daughter, when she took her CASP test, she was disengaged. I don't even know that she fully put her whole effort into it because of the whole COVID years that she had. It was not a challenge. It was kind of like, okay, why am I taking this? So those are my concerns. I appreciate anything that anybody's doing, but the same to the effect of the intervention that's going on at Oakmont, that my daughter also has an open period. If she needs help in a class chemistry every single day, she can only go one day. And hopefully it happens to be a day before a test, is what I have to say about that for right now. I understand contact tracing fully. So I would like to thank you, and that was just my own input there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. Jennifer Santry.
Hi, Jennifer Santry. I have two daughters at West Park, one in 9th grade and one in 11th grade. I know that you want us to fill out the form, but it's really hard to know, and I know that we talked about this earlier, it's really hard to know what we're covering from this. And I mean, I scrolled through some of the items online on the extended agenda, but even though I wouldn't know that we were addressing math scores today. I've been debating on talking about this for quite a while. Pete, you talked about the math curriculum. It was probably about a month, or probably more than a month ago now, and that we're reviewing new curriculum. I was so confused when you were talking about that. You were asking, well, how much time are the classes taking to review that curriculum? How much time away from their regular classes is that taking? It was a minimal amount. Last year, West Park opened, as we know, as a brand new school in the middle of COVID. So a whole lot of challenges going on. And they completely blew up the math program last year. And as you were talking about the curriculum, I couldn't understand why that was happening. And I addressed it with them, and it continued, and it continues this year as well. So if, with all the challenges that our kids have and are still having, we're doing something completely different in math. They want them to explore math and learn on their own. They didn't even have a textbook last year, and they don't have a textbook this year either for IM3. I think it's online maybe. So that, looking at these math scores, really, it made me need to bring this up. Also, intervention at West Park, it doesn't exist. They're doing a new thing this year called advisory period, which is another thing that I want to talk about, but I'm not going to do it now because it doesn't have anything to do with math. But what it does have to do with is that intervention was taken away, so the kids can't go to the various classes and get the help that they need. And that's also very disappointing. So it's something that we'll need to talk about, and I will definitely elaborate on all of that in later time. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, bring it back to the board for final comments. Pete.
Well, thanks. First, I want to thank Julie because I know you have been hammering this so that we have these discussions. And I remember my very first meeting, you talked about it, and you've talked about it every meeting that we've been here. So thanks. And I know staff has done a lot of work in this area and continues to do a lot of work in this area. Now I'm going to say something that I don't believe I would ever say in public, but I read an editorial in the Los Angeles Times 2 days ago that I actually agreed with. And it is titled, and if you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it. The editorial, by their editorial board, it wasn't a guest editorial, was "Learning Loss is Real, Stop Pretending Otherwise." And I think this district has not pretended otherwise. Continuing to look at it. And there's some stuff, well, I won't say I agree with it 100% because there's stuff in here I don't think reflects necessarily our teachers or our bargaining units, but I think probably the most important line or sentence in the whole thing is their conclusion. But we also can't address a problem unless we're willing to name it, look it in the eye, and recognize its truth. And I bring that up because that's what Julie has been pushing for. That is what this board has been pursuing. That's what our staff has been pursuing. And it's really important that we continue to talk about it. We continue to not only research it and look at the data, but have these interventions with the students that need it at all the different levels. And I am really concerned about some of the things that Heidi brought up. Not concerned that you brought them up, but concerned about the same topics. And it's something that my wife and I have talked a lot about, is that learning loss going from K-8 to 9-12. And that is something that is going to have a significant impact on a generation of kids. And we have to recognize that our learning loss in 9-12 is going to have a significant impact on the college system, from community college up to private universities and everywhere in between. So I'm just glad we're looking at it. I don't think we have all the answers yet. We have a lot more to do, And I know we changed the language a little bit on our title slides, but I'm going to implore you to go back to using the word learning loss, because you have to name it, you have to look it in the eye, and you have to recognize the truth. And I think we have to do that. Kids learned a lot of other things. We taught them how to be a little more individually responsible. We taught them how to be remote learners. Hopefully that will translate into remote workers, and they'll give them opportunities in the workforce that they may not have had otherwise. But I think we need to hammer in and keep repeating it, much like Julie has done, so that we don't forget it and we continue to address it. So those are my editorial comments.
Julie?
Dr. Moore, thank you. Jen, thank you for preparing that. I'm just happy to see that we have a starting point to work towards and have some information. I'm really, really grateful. And I look forward to all the future updates on where things are going and hearing about the different interventions and pieces that are put in to support the loss and the acceleration, because I think that's just a great way to look at it. Ms. Layton, by bridging the gap and moving forward, it's progressive, and I think it's helpful, because it's really where we need to get. The one thing I want to ask for is, you talked about, there was two things I saw in the slides. One was the universal screener, and there was another piece that was teachers, professional development for teachers based on what they need and what they want. And so I ask you to look for using that as the kind of the incentive of the quicker you get the universal screener out, the quicker teachers can get what they need and what they want. And Dr. Moore and I talked about this, and I said, how fast can we roll this out? And I know buy-in is super important. And so I hope that you get buy-in by offering that the access to professional development as the incentive to get buy-in. That's just an idea I have. So, and then the third thing is that I'm concerned about is the intervention period, and I don't know much about it. I haven't talked to my son about it, who's at Wood Creek. But if this is truly the case, where you can only go to your priority period, and we're using contact tracing as the reason behind that, I think we need to knock it off, because I'm looking at what's required for contact tracing. I don't see that. I think this is probably where things are the loosest in terms of guidelines required by the CDPH. And kids, I mean, I know my son's a junior and he needs help in math. He's going to need help in chemistry. There's, U.S. history. I mean, these subjects are really, really hard. And particularly if students are going to be missing school because of quarantines, we can't expect them to only go to their priority period for their intervention. That is not going to work, and I don't think that's acceptable. But I don't know the whole answer. I don't know the whole problem, and maybe I'm not informed enough about that. So I'd really like to see that looked into, because I don't think contact tracing is a good excuse. I just don't think it's a good excuse. So I'm sorry to end on that. I'll go back to thank you very much. I should have done it in reverse order. But I really appreciate the getting this going and preparing for us.
Yeah, I want to say thank you again for bringing this. And we have never been ashamed in this district to look hard problems in the face and say, let's try and figure it out. Let me address the West Park High School thing. There is on Tuesdays and Thursdays after school math help. I mean, but you said there was none, and so I wanted you to know there is some. There is some, and it's after school Tuesdays and Thursdays. I only know that because I know my kids are taking advantage of it. So look, we don't have all the answers right now, but again, we've never been ashamed to say, let's figure it out, and I think that's exactly what we're doing. Where many are putting their head in the sand and saying everything's wonderful, everything's great, and these problems don't age like wine; they age like milk. And so we've got to address them head on and deal with them, because they will get worse the more we avoid them. And so, not that we're avoiding them, because I don't think we are. I think we're taking them head on. And I want to say again, thank you very much. I appreciate that. it's something we're going to have to keep working on, and it's not. There is no short-term panacea where we can do X, Y, Z, and the problem goes away. This is going to be something we're going to have to be working on, I suspect, for several years. So.
Heidi? I would also thank Dr. Moore, Ms. Lane. Thank you for the presentation. This is an issue that we need to address, and we, as colleagues have said, we don't shine away from hard topics. I think this is one that continues. The math issue has been one that some of us have dealt with on this board for a number of years to provide the resources, provide what we can to do whatever we can to help our excellent math teachers in this district do their job and with our kids. And as Heidi mentioned, great. I remember doing that with my own daughter, trying to help her with math, and it's nearly impossible. I would absolutely agree with you, nearly impossible. And she struggled with math, and it was not an easy subject. So I think there's that. And now I can't imagine how they were on distance learning, trying to learn mathematics when it's already difficult enough for many of the students in the classroom with the teacher. And the way it's taught, and we've switched programs over the last few years. We've provided math coaches for the teachers, and it's not an easy process. It needs to be addressed long term for the next generation on how to best learn mathematics. We continue to do, I think, better than the state as a whole, but it's probably, I think they're catching up as those graphs were showing as we flat. Some of the state scores were coming up, but I think the intervention, these programs that you're talking about are going to be very helpful, very useful, and it continues on. You talk about K through 8 going to high school. Well, I'm seeing it in college. I wonder in college they're getting the same, in many cases that virtual learning. And they're going out into the career world here soon, and what will they be missing in their profession as they go on? So it starts in kindergarten and continues to college, and I'm glad it's been brought up, and we're addressing it. So I'll look forward to hearing future reports on this. So thank you. Okay. With that, we move to our public hearing. Item 6.1, unless we need to take just a quick time out. 5 minutes. Take 5 minutes. I know our the voting areas in advance of draft trustee voting area plans by demographer, Assistant Superintendent for Business Services, Joe Landon. And at this time, as part of the public hearing, members of the public may submit comments on the establishment of voting area boundaries for the new trustee voting areas that will be established as part of the district's transition from an at-large election system to a by-trustee area election system. Speakers will be given 3 minutes to make comments on this matter and this matter only. After the presentation by Mr. Landon and our demographer, we will then take public comment on this issue. Mr. Landon.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to introduce and also let you know that we do have Milton Foster, who's watching the live stream, our attorney. Hopefully I'll be able to answer any questions if there's any legal questions we have, but if there are any questions that I don't know the answers to, he's listening in and we'll be able to fill in the gaps from there. So for right now, this is our second pre-map public hearing, and we would like to go over some of the mapping tool information that we talked about last time, as well as get some direction on what type of public forums that the board may or may not want to do, as well as discuss potential direction as far as whether to take action on certain direction to our demographer. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the demographer we have, and Doug, who will walk us through some of the mapping tools.
Thank you. I will do my best. Doug Yoakum, National Demographics Corporation. Good to see you again. This you'll recognize from last time is our second public hearing to talk about the community and how they want to do redistricting. I wanted to inform you that the October 1st date is getting better. September 20th is the day that the statewide database has announced they will release the actual data that can be used by all districts to draw their districts. So September 20th is the day we'll have data. At that point, I hopefully will have heard from you as to what kind of tools you would like to have, so that the citizens of the district can help you tell you how to draw districts in this district. And another thing we need to hear is what dates you would like to have the post-map hearings, so that you allow some time to have the public draw maps and then comment on them, give direction to me as to how you want some final maps drawn, and then the adoption date, we have to do that by March 1st, 2022. That's the state law. You asked me for some screenshots of the kind of tools that we offer all of our clients. This is what we call the simple map drawing tool. It's simply a map of your district. This happens to be the city of Lake Forest in Southern California. And what it does is it's something that anybody can use, and then put their name at the bottom, tell us how to contact them, and they can also provide comments or anything they would like along with it, on a separate written page. And all they do is just use a pencil or a pen and draw districts based on the final number of how 5 equal districts would look on their particular map. So it's very similar. I can show you one that we use in Sacramento as well, but it's simply a map that people can draw on. There are numbers on it, so people can add up the numbers to tell us what their district would look like. There's also a feature, an Excel program that goes along with this. If people are familiar with that, they draw their districts, and instead of population numbers on the map, it's just unit numbers. And they tell Excel what unit they would like in which district, and then Excel will add up all of the districts for them. And hopefully they will add up to 5 equally populated districts. Oh, I'm sorry, it's demonstrating it. There's the number. of the unit that you put down here in Excel, and then Excel adds it up and comes up with 5 districts with all the population counted up. Our next one, this is the first one that you can use a computer program with. If we could go to, let me go to the next one first. We'll start with this. This is the most complicated tool that we offer. It's called Maptitude for redistricting, and it's available. All you need to do is click on it with various, and it'll give you the language you could use of it. Can you bring that up right now? I think I logged in already here. They display it on the. This is the most complicated, and it's also the most robust. In other words, it has a lot of data in it, and you can have data on there while you're drawing. What he's using right now is a tool that focuses in, and what you see on the screen right now are census blocks. Now, if you go over here in the toolbox, which is that little square, you're going to draw a new district, and the source is all of the current blocks. And if you go to that little arrow down there, hit that arrow, there you go, and click on some downtown Sacramento blocks over here on the left-hand side. Yeah, that's East Sacramento right there. What we're starting to do is draw a district in Arden Arcade area. Now it takes a long time. If you go over, let's see, where is it? If you could bring up that box underneath, it's called changes. Right there. Oh, you just minimized it. It's on the right hand, bottom right. There you go, right there. Move it over to the left, and we'll be able to see it, I think. Oh, there you go. What it will tell you is it will tell you how many people you're counting as you select these little blocks, and then go back to the toolbox. If you want to go faster, go down below where that circle is. You can draw a circle, or you can draw a shape by that, like right there. Now draw a square, do four, there you go. 1, 2, click, 3, 4. Now you've drawn a larger area. You can go a little faster. And if you look at your change box, you'll see that you've selected approximately, I can't see the population, but in Sacramento, there it is. You've selected about 46,000 people to put in this district, and you need about 300,000 more. So you need to make your selections larger. That's how this works. And if you, there you go, drawing more. We're already enjoying ourselves. So this is how Maptitude works. Click on districts on the bottom left there. Bottom left. There you go. Once you've selected the area you want, this will keep track of all 5 districts that you're drawing and tell you how big they are, how many people are in them, what the ethnic makeup is. All of that data is included in this program. And under options, you can select you can have Latinos on as you draw, or African American, or apartment dwellers. All of the various. Just click on the theme arrow on the right under none. I think it's there. Yeah. Various demographic factors you can have on your map while you're drawing. So it's very robust. It can be complicated, but this is what professional demographers use to draw districts. All right, let's go to District R if I can find it. It's number 2. Yeah, just access this tool and scroll down a bit. Click on either one of those blocks there. This is an easier program that the folks can use. That it can be used to draw 5 different districts, but what we're using it for and focusing on in Sacramento County, which is one of our clients also, is using this to highlight your neighborhood. Tell us what your neighborhood is, what your boundaries is. So somebody from Oak Park can come on this map and draw where they think Oak Park is, and they can tell us we'd like Oak Park to be together, or Curtis Park, or whatever other community in Sacramento you'd like to do. You can use it. It's a paintbrush kind of program. If you can use that, yeah, yes. What you see is the paintbrush will highlight what you tell it to, and you can say this is Citrus Heights, this is Folsom, and then if you scroll down on the right hand side where that bar is, there you go. That it tells you how much population you're including as you go along. And it's just a paintbrush tool that folks can use to draw districts if they want. It's not as complicated as the one we just used, but you can also use this to highlight your individual community, and there's a place on there where you can describe it in writing and then go up to the top and save it, and that will send it to us at NDC, and it'll appear on your website as a drawn map, and someone will have explained what they drew. So that's the tools we feature. Go ahead and shut that off, and we'll move on with the presentation here. There we go. You asked for prices. Here they are. Obviously, the paper maps are the cheapest version. You can add District R to that at this price, and the Maptitude for redistricting is the most expensive option. Questions?
All right, board members, questions?
And thank your staff for setting that up for me.
No, we'll take public comment first. I have one speaker card, Marla Franz.
Well, this is certainly interesting. I did a little Googling a couple weeks ago when this agenda item first came up, and learning about the at-large versus the by trustee. My feeling, just as I was Googling pros and cons, I'm disappointed we have to do this, which I realize it's not a choice, it's just we have to, so I won't go down that road. I appreciate all your comments 2 weeks ago. I wasn't here, I was listening though. I look forward to 10 years, and I worry, how can we mitigate some of the obvious problems 10 years from now when you have 5 people that are protecting their fiefdom, right? I have a student, my kids are at Grant Bay, sorry I didn't introduce myself, but I appreciate that I can go to any one of you. I feel like I could, because you all kind of represent, right? You advocate for all of the kids. I worry 10 years from now, I only have one person. And what if that one person I don't agree with? And now that's the only person that I can go to, because no one else is gonna care because I'm not voting for them. So, 2 weeks ago, I listened to a lot of rules where you need to have the neighborhoods and you want to use some streets as very, the natural landmarks, right? So Douglas would be a line for someone, and it sounds like it needs to be continuous areas. And I really appreciate you all speaking about priority of maybe having the trustee represent 2 schools, and ideally even 3, because even if you may not know who I can vote for, I would feel like I'd have 3 people I could go to and say, this is important to me with my school. Right now, I feel like, even though none of you have kids that go to Grant Bay, I've never felt like you've discriminated against Grant Bay. It's very much just all the kids. And I would love for you to figure out how can we prioritize. There's rules that we have to meet. I don't know if it's laws. This whole idea of it must be continuous, it must have the same socioeconomic grouping, I think that was mentioned 2 weeks ago. Are those suggestions? Are those laws? Can you prioritize what's important to you to make sure that in 10 years you don't have 5 fiefdoms? And then tell the people who are making these maps, we want this to be the priority over roads, right? I don't care if my neighborhood's all messed up because my kids still go to the same school. I know there's Oakmont issues, right? But from a voting perspective, so what if it looks like Oakmont boundaries, my perspective. So I think I sent you an email a couple weeks ago. A lot of these ideas, I'm kind of winging it here, but anyway, I think I'm done.
Thank you, Marla. All right. Well, is there any other public comment on that? Even someone who didn't fill out a speaker card? Okay. All right, bring it back to the board.
Sorry, I wasn't here 2 weeks ago and I did not hear the meeting. And I do have a question about it being contiguous. Is it always contiguous? Does it have to be contiguous for all the districts, all 5?
Yes, districts should be contiguous.
Should or have to be? Should or must?
School districts are not subject to the Fair Maps Act, which cities and counties are subject to. So technically, that is not a requirement, but it's certainly a recommendation because you don't want Granite Bay as a district and then have it combined with Antelope. What's the common thing there? And if you're doing that, why are you doing it? And are you connecting it with a little line about this thick going down the road?
Well,
that's what we mean by contiguity. That's the kind of thing that you generally
if the
don't
goal
want.
is fair representation, though, demographic fair representation, why does it matter that all the landmarks have to touch each other?
The only reason really is simplicity for the voter to look at a map and say, okay, I'm in this district. And if it's a hodgepodge district that goes like this, it's kind of hard for somebody to understand what district they're in.
But you're
and
saying
let me just say
can I
this.
just follow up one? You're saying the Fair Maps Act doesn't apply to school districts, though?
The Fair Maps Act does not apply to school districts.
Only to cities and counties.
That's correct.
I love that. Sorry.
Interesting.
I don't mean to throw a wrench in things like
Equal
that. I always
population
do.
applies to everyone. You have
Sorry,
to draw
say that
equally
again?
populated districts.
Say that
And let me
again?
just say,
Say that
Mr.
last
President,
word. Say what you just said.
equally populated districts is the law. It's the federal law all the way from top down. Roughly the same number of people.
But it could be squiggly lines, and
It's likely going to be school.
not continuous. Contiguous.
Let me say this, Mr. President, based on comments from the last meeting. I don't have a dog here in this fight, so I'm your consultant. You tell me how to do this.
No, I know.
And that's how I will do it.
But we're also just asking, since you've done this before as a demographer, we have not done this before. I haven't done it before, so we're asking some questions of you on the process and what you've seen in the past. Is all.
And I will try to answer all of those questions.
The reason I ask is if it's fair representation and it's based on equitable number of constituents and voters, then I wonder if there's some guiding principles that this board develops based on what's best for Roseville Joint Union High School District, rather than what we think. And I know I heard there was some things about 3 schools represented, or what if the guiding principle is the district are defined to represent all the schools. If there are 5 districts that are in each district still represents 5 schools with equal number of constituents, and also represents the diversity that is the intent of the Voters Act. I'm just making a recommendation on guiding principles that we might all be able to get behind that best serves our district. Districts are rough, right? I mean, there's some good things about them and there are some tricky things about them, and I share the concern that Ms. France had mentioned and have seen in other communities. Haven't seen it in school districts because I don't know what school districts are in districts except for our county right now. But anyway, that's just my thought, is guiding principles to lead us down. And maybe it isn't what I just said, but maybe there are some guiding principles we get behind.
I share the same concerns as far as not a fan of this. I think what Ms. Fran said is exactly what potentially happens in 10 years, and you get your elected board members who care about Granite Bay or Wood Creek or Oakmont, and they just focus on that school. They just go to that school and they listen to those parents, and that's it. I mean, that's a very real thing that potentially could happen. So I'm not a fan of going to districts myself. I understand it's the law. We received the demand letter. We have to do this, and I'm certainly open to the process. I know others here at this board have a lot more experience, especially a couple of our board members have a lot more experience in this than I do, for sure, and have comments on this. So I guess I'm just sort of sharing out loud. I'm open to this process, how it looks, and I think that's really interesting, that we're not technically required to have contiguous districts. Would that open us up to litigation, though?
Yes.
But that's interesting. The Fair Maps Act says no, that it's not required, but still litigation's another factor.
Yeah, the Fair Maps Act applies to cities and counties.
Okay.
But guiding principles that address the possible litigation. We're at just as much of risk of possible litigation any way we look at it. But one other thing too is one other guiding principle that I might suggest at this point is we're going to know the planned growth in West Park based on the Roseville specific plan. So we're going to be able to know Roseville's growth overall. I don't know about the Granite Bay portion or the Antelope portion. Those might be all built out. Or Granite Bay is probably not entirely all built out, but I think that's one of the other pieces that we look at in
to consider. And finally, how the process start, which districts are up for election, and how we factor the people living in having multiple board members in the same district, how we play that out too. So I know we're filibustering between our two that really want to talk to this. And Heidi, jump in before if you have any thoughts on this.
I just have the same exact concerns that you express. Like, we all represent all of the schools, and it's great. I mean, I think the way that it is great. So it's like, oh, why fix something that's not broken, that has potential negative ramifications? So how to best put as many schools overlapping, in one district, and it might look a little bit wonky. So I don't have any solutions.
Okay.
But the same concerns.
Pete, I know you have some
Yes.
some opinions on this.
I have a lot of opinions, and I have been through this, and I've served in a district-based capacity. And I think this is the worst thing we could do for our district, but we have to do it. I know I've said that every time. I don't think this is the right direction for our district, but we have to do it. I think that although the Fair Maps Act does not apply, I think it's important that we realize that the federal laws, Federal Voting Rights Act and the California Voting Rights Act apply regardless. And they're pretty prescriptive, and there's a body of case law related to this. And in our first presentation, and I've viewed all the presentations that you've done with other cities and stuff that compare federal laws, traditional criteria, and than the Fair Maps Act. And in addition to that, the traditional criteria, if for those who don't recall, are communities of interest, compact, contiguous, visible boundaries, respect for voters' wishes, although I disagree with that one, planned future growth. And planned future growth can only, you can only plan for a deviation no greater than 10% across your district. So even though we know there's thousands of homes being built right now, and they're going to be occupied next year, we can't count those because we have to go by the numbers and we have to stay within our deviation numbers. But I think it's important that if we're going to do this, we follow best practices. The League of Women Voters has a document on best practices. The ACLU has a document on best practices. There's at least 4 universities that I found that have documents on best practices. And those are things that I think we have to seriously consider, because if we're going to do this, we need to do it right. And while the Fair Maps Act does not strictly apply to us, we have to have the context of what is going on around us. Congressional maps, drawings have a body of law. State Assembly and State Senate have a body of law. The cities and counties have a body of law that guide them. And for us as a school district to not follow the intent of those, especially when 2 of those have been voted in by the people of the state, I think we have an obligation to follow, not by the letter, but the intent of all of those in trying to do the best that we can. And I know I spoke about this last week, but I think as a board, we do need to keep in mind the communities we serve, because there are true communities of interest. We span not only the city of Roseville, but the unincorporated area of Dry Creek, Antelope, Granite Bay, Morgan Creek. We have all these other areas. We have the future growth area where there are some homes out in the Placer Ranch area. We have all these areas that are communities of interest, and we have to prioritize community of interest. I think that is one of the foundational bedrocks of districting. I think contiguous is important because we have to look at it in the eyes of those that we will eventually represent more in districts and the voters. They shouldn't have to get out a map every single time to figure out, well, shoot, my neighbor across the street is represented by Pete, my neighbor down the block is represented by Heidi, and I'm represented by Scott because I'm here. It should make sense to the average voter, the average resident, who their representative is, because the whole basis of the Federal Voting Rights Acts and the California Voting Rights Acts is representative government. You pick the people who are going to represent you for your community, even if we don't think that that's the best way for us. We're kind of pigeonholed there. And I think they need to be compact. You can't just philosophically say, imagine if you lived in Dry Creek and we drew a district that had Granite Bay and Antelope in it. I think that was the example that you used. How would you feel if you lived in Dry Creek if you got jumped over to take these other 2 desperate areas and put them together? I feel very, very strongly about not aligning with school attendance boundaries. And I think we've heard that. We want to get as much representation as possible, and maybe we prescribe it tightly, maybe we make it loose, but I think that's something that we have to do. And as Andrew mentioned, we know we're going to have conflicts. We just need to have a fair way and an objective way before the maps are drawn to say how we're going to do it. Put the names in a hat, pick the trustee numbers and the names, however it may happen, but we need to have that where that's random and not, not us sitting here fighting. Should it be me or Scott? Should it be, Scott or Heidi? We need to not have that argument. But I really think we have to follow best practices. Any deviation from that, we're opening up ourselves up for liability. We're opening up for lawsuits. All you have to do is look at the city of Santa Clara, $6 million because they couldn't draw a map that respected communities of interest. And it cost them $6 million. And they were at the point where the courts were going to impose maps on them. We just can't put ourselves in that position. I think we have to take a best practices approach. And I personally don't care if it's the League of Women Voters approach, it's the ACLU approach, it's an approach that we come up with. But I think we need to do that before the data even comes in and have a discussion and figure out exactly where we want our cascading waterfall of priorities to be so that we just hand it to the professionals and say, do it. Now, as far as the community involvement, can you put that slide up that has the options of the three
Can't
different?
seem to go backwards on this thing. What's that?
I think we also need to make sure we're talking about that, and I don't think we're going to have 100 people that want to sit down and draw maps for us. I think
which one?
The one that just had the options and the prices.
Oh, here we go.
The summary one. I really think the middle is where we should be philosophically, because then people who want to look at how many voters are within an attendance boundary, they can draw that out if they want. We can look, we can get the input. I'm not as much interested in having people draw specific maps as getting input as to who they believe are communities of interest and who should stick together. And that really is a decision I think that should come from those that we represent today and that will be representing the day these maps go into effect. So that was a lot of rambling, but I think we need to have a set of priorities, and we need to, at minimum, follow the traditional criteria. My preference is we follow the Fair Maps Act and the best practices.
Different than school districts. And cities cover the whole entire city, and it's not like, well, these roads are going to be improved over here because that's where that district representative lives, but it's not going to be improved over there. But that's what can happen with schools. That's what I feel.
Right.
If we represent, if there's not broad representation across all the schools, and I wonder why doesn't the Fair Maps Act apply to school districts?
You'd have to ask the legislature that question. I can't answer it.
There's a reason. I wonder what it is.
To be honest with you, I think they just didn't think about it when as they do this stuff as sort of a hodgepodge. The Fair Maps Act came in sort of on its own, and I think they just didn't think about it applying to school districts and special districts. It was just, hey, it applies to cities and counties. Having seen the sausage get made, from the legislature, I just think they just missed it. But having said that, I don't know. Julie, do you have more?
No, not right now, but I might.
Well, I'll make some comments. I will tell you, I agree with a lot of what Pete says. I think the middle area is where we should probably be. It allows some people to do it on paper and to use the spreadsheets if they want, or to use the little paint thing if they want. I will tell you candidly, I have read many of the. I will not proclaim to have read all of the. I think there's like 7 or 8 different best practices, and the reason that there are 7 or 8 different best practices versions is because they all don't agree as to what the best practices are. And so I think we need to come up with what we think are best practices for our district. We mentioned some of them before. I think each. I agree with you, Pete. I think we should completely ignore what the boundaries are, the school district boundaries. We just should. I think we should have every board member should touch at least 2 schools. Every district that's made should have at least 2 schools in it. Not necessarily the physical campus, but attendance boundaries of at least 2 schools. Because then you get rid of the provincialism of, well, your school, my school needs X, and if your school gets a new roof, then my school can't get a pool. And so I'm going to vote against that roof because I want my school to have a pool. That's ridiculous. We need to have all board members representing as many schools as possible, I think. That's, again, just my own 2 cents. But I'm not as concerned about litigation, although it is in the back of my mind because we did get an email this letter, this demand came from an attorney who is more litigious than most, and frankly, he's earned the reputation he has, for good, bad, or indifferent. And so I'm not terribly concerned about the the maps that we draw being super compact necessarily, although I think ideally is probably a good idea. I do think, and I'm getting really into the weeds here, you'll understand this, and I do think we need to have a poison pill in this language that we adopt, so that when the Supreme Court issues their ruling, if we fall under some statutory level where the court says, if you have a certain amount of diversity or above, you must have districts. If we fall below that, then I think if we can have this thing self-implode, then we go back to all, at-large elections. Great. I don't know if that's a possibility or not.
I have not heard of that scenario. I don't know that there's a court case going on right now. Although some of the cities that are in litigation right now have probably made that.
There's a case pending before the Supreme Court right now.
The state Supreme Court?
Yeah.
Is it Santa Monica?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I know because my partner wrote a brief for the League of California Cities.
Oh, okay.
It has been briefed, and they're now doing the Friends of the Court briefs, and then I assume they'll do a briefing schedule at some point. But I think and I've got some language I can share with you, from an ordinance from the city, that if I think there's a certain level, I don't know that if, again, depending on how the Supreme Court rules, if there's some, threshold, minimum threshold of diversity that is necessary for them to then trigger, yes, if you're above this threshold, you must have by district elections. Below that, you don't have to. Then it'd be great to then just have it be wiped out and say, well, we're below that threshold, we don't need to. Again, just my 2 cents, because I don't think districts are particularly beneficial. I will tell you that the data, and I've said this before and I'll keep saying it, everything we do as a school and as a school district should be based on data. Everything we do should be based on data, actual data. And it's what has driven excellence over the last, 20 plus years, or longer, and I think that's what's going to keep us in a great place down the road. But I think the data shows that many of these public agencies that have been required to go to by district elections, the number of minority board members or council members has gone down, not gone up. And I can show you that with data. And so the very purpose for which this law was put in place was to increase minority elected officials. It has done exactly the opposite. And again, I'm on a soapbox, and this is the last thing I'm going to say about that. I actually have a public agency that got a demand to go to by-district elections, and they routinely have to go out and find people to run for office or to be appointed to an office because the election period for filing closed and no one filed because no one in that area wanted to run. And so then it leaves people scrambling to find someone to appoint them to these boards and commissions. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. But so back to what we need. I think we need to make sure that our districts are drawn so that at a minimum, every district should be within the boundaries of 2 schools at a minimum. I think that's necessary. The more, the better. Number 2, I think I do think we should try to have them as contiguous and compact as possible, recognizing that the higher priority is you don't want any single district to have just one attendance boundary. I do think we should plan for the maximum possible potential, so we should have that full 10% deviation so that the west side, as it gets built up, it will start to then equal the other districts, and then ultimately maybe, and if that means we divide it down the middle, the western portion of it, so you have 2 board members whose boundaries can increase in size, maybe that's a possibility, something to look at, because then it would make it more, I think the numbers would be more equalized a little bit to a certain extent, although I think these numbers in a decade are going to get greatly out of whack. It's just part of.
They always do,
They
and that's
always
why
do.
we
It's-
redistrict every 10
Yeah,
years.
yeah, it's just part of life. I'm trying to think of some other priorities that we had talked about before. I do think it's good to keep neighborhoods together, generally speaking, and I think it's good to not run, boundaries down the middle of a street. I do have actually one of my public agencies that literally you've got one section of town, and then literally the city limits run along a street. The neighbors that live on that street are not in the city, but the street is in the city. And then
There are
there's
some
another city.
funny looking cities in this state.
Yeah,
You would be
it
surprised.
looks like a barbell. I mean, it looks like a dumbbell.
Mhm.
You know, with the handle in the middle. This one street is
I have two clients. One they both have. They actually annex some areas. So there's an area way out in one, and it's connected by a street, literally. And then one city basically is very compact, going along a freeway like this, and they annexed an area that goes way down. So there are some strangely shaped cities.
Yeah, so
but
I
that
do-
forces certain things in redistricting because you can't. If you start here, there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah, yeah, and so I think where you do have major thoroughfares like Highway 80, if there's a natural break between districts that can happen there, I think it's good to do that. I'm not married to that necessarily, but I think it's good if you can have that or large.
I would be happy to listen and to hear, to have written down principles, some principles that you direct me to go by.
That's what I think we're doing. Yeah. So anyway, those
And
are my thoughts.
I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I'd like to take Mr. Constant with me to every meeting I go to. He gets this.
All right, so at this point I heard, are we giving direction? Or I think we're coming back for an action item in 2 weeks to give formal direction.
Yeah, I think we have it agendized to give direction on that.
Oh, yeah.
But not necessarily direction on the others parts yet.
And we want to do that in 2 weeks.
Yeah. And I don't
Also,
know
any community outreach you would like to do.
Yes. Well, I think I'm hearing, at least I hear from at least 2 board members, the middle option, paper and Excel plus District R is the one that we, at least 2 seem to like. Julie, are you good with that one? Heidi? And I'm good with it too. So let's go with the paper and Excel plus District R.
Okay.
And then in relation to the community meetings, my only suggestion there is if we're going to do a community meeting around maps, that it be set up as a workshop meeting versus a meeting like this where people come up and talk and you can't point to maps. The ones that I've been involved with where you're able to have the maps and people gather around tables and talk about them and point, and if we have to scribble on things, those are the productive ones. Those are the productive ones that can lead to better maps versus having someone there try to articulate something that we can't picture on a map. I just think that we should have one of those meetings minimally.
As recommendations or starting points.
Yeah, someone
Uh-huh.
could bring in their tools. Can you remind us of when those come in the sequence of this?
What? I'm sorry.
Any of the community meetings? From here to the end, where are we going to do?
We have not scheduled any yet, and that's why I have 2 question marks on that schedule thing.
And are we supposed to have 2? Or is it totally
the Fair
optional?
Maps Act requires 2. If you want to follow that model, that would be fine. But those are hearings that are actual maps that you are considering adopting, and you would make comments on them and hear public comments on those maps, and then you would have another hearing where you would finalize a map and actually adopt it.
But that's not the community meetings, though.
Right.
A community meeting is separate. We call them workshops, and that will be less formal, where I might say something about what the criteria are, especially if you've given them to me.
So
And then I would teach folks how to use these things, so that they would submit them, and we would take those into consideration.
When can we schedule those, that
Yeah.
first workshop?
Entirely up to you.
We're ready.
I would like to, normally I would push to have as many as possible, but quite frankly, we're not getting a lot of participation. So I would say we schedule one and we publicize it and we do that community outreach meeting that you just described, not the approval meeting, not the MAPS meeting at the end, but the workshop. I think we should pick one and we should have it whenever you think is best after the data's available, because without the data, you can't really
Yeah.
do
And
anything
it'll
to
take
it.
us a while, once you've ordered these tools, to actually get them prepared and ready with all of your data in them.
So when does that work for timing-wise for you on the continuum between now and March?
I would say late October. A lot of jurisdictions are using Saturdays for that, if that's something that you're interested in. And board members do not have to attend. In fact, there might be some Brown Act issues if more than two of you
All
do.
right. In
So
fact, the most successful meetings I've ever seen on this are, you just open up a block of time and say and I'll just use them, from 1 to 5. Come on in, sit down with the staff and demographer and draw your map or learn how to draw a map and see what it is. And that way anybody can just come in when they want and they can do it and learn about it, learn how to do it or get help, or bring their maps with them and show them, hey, here's what I'm kind of thinking. And I think it's actually good to not have board members there.
Okay. How about October 23rd?
my schedule.
That's a Saturday.
Oh, I'm sure that's fine if it's a Saturday, as far as I'm concerned.
That work?
It depends on how your staff be, and then you'd have to find a location, of course.
I don't think it matters.
No,
for
I know
us.
we're not showing
So,
up. We're not going to show up.
I mean, it's
at
more
least I'm
about
not.
does it work for John and does it work for Joe?
Works for Joe.
End of the table.
Joe, thumbs up, Joe.
That ball rolled real quick. Those are the community meetings that he's talking about. Those are the 2 meetings where maps have been drafted that the board considers.
Those are
adopting.
hearings. Those are official hearings.
Those are hearings. Yeah, that's part of the adoption process. That's not the community meeting where citizens can come and sort of fiddle around with the numbers and see, well, what if you move this neighborhood over here and that neighborhood over there, and what about these different options? That's different.
I think as central as possible. If we're only going to do one, it should be as central as possible. This guy has a good map. He can pick a central spot.
I didn't hear that.
I said, you got a great map. You can pick a central spot for us.
Point on it.
At the district office.
If you have a community room, if you have a internet access, those are requirements.
And this District R, people can submit those electronically.
Yeah, they draw a neighborhood or a map, and as I said, there's a little save option in the corner that sends it to an entity that then sends it to us.
Yeah, and I suspect many will probably utilize just the electronic. Those, when I say many, I mean those that actually do it will. Many of those will do. We may only get a handful that will be submitted.
Yeah. I have no idea what level of participation we're going to get. So far, in all of my various travels, it's been relatively light. But there's COVID, there's heat, there's fires. People are worried about different things right now.
Okay. So, and then we'll agendize this for 2 weeks for further direction. Okay.
For this?
No, I think it was simple direction, right? Okay.
And And then we could schedule your final hearings. The final hearings where they actually look at maps. Or January.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the public hearing's closed on this item. Moving on, we pulled a couple consent items. 5.8 is the stadium support building, and Joe Landon's here to present on stadium support building design and construction administration fee proposal.
They're just pulling it back up. So when we initially did a contract with our architects to work on the stadium support building, we were targeting Antelope High School first, as they didn't really have any facility or any restrooms close, and wanted to do some beginning scoping work for what the other sites could look like. After starting that process, we decided it would be best to work with our architect to fully design all 5 stadium snack bars, and so this agenda item is to approve amendments to the architectural services agreement with HMC Group so that they could fully design all 5 stadium snack bar buildings, and that we could work on constructing them all at the same time, working with the same contractor. So the purpose of this item is to update that architectural agreement to incorporate all 5, with the exception of West Park, who already has one, stadium support buildings.
Great. Board members, do you have any questions on this?
Can you remind me with Fund 25 is Fund 25 developer fees?
What was the question? Sorry.
Can you remind me what Fund 25 developer fees are?
Yeah, so those are the funds we get from when buildings permits are pulled, developer fees. That's the predominant budget source of it now. We will have reimbursement for Measure D funds. We've spent all of Measure D, but we have state reimbursement funds that'll come later. That'll be able to replenish it, but right now, cash-wise, we have to pay for it out of Fund 25.
And the Measure D was for antelope initiative, right? We used Measure D for antelopes to begin the process.
We were using Measure D for the beginning of the process, but now that we've closed out Measure D, we're using the developer fees and state reimbursement funds to pay for this.
I just want to say how fortunate Roseville Joint Union High School District is to be able to add. I wanted to say how fortunate we are in Roseville Joint to be able to add this to all our schools, or to these school sites. I think it's a really nice enhancement, and I'm very grateful that we're able to do that here.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Anybody from the public wish to speak on this? Yeah, I would say the same. I think, we were working on this for some time, and Joe, thanks for all your work on seeing this through. And I know it took some time, but this is these will be fantastic facilities for each of these schools, and another blessing that Measure D brought to us, and the type of facilities we have in the district. So.
We were originally thinking the costs were $2.5 million per site. Now we're thinking it's down to $1.6 million per site.
We're hoping, we're trying to get it around, and we had discussions about trying to bring the cost down to we were targeting about $1.5 million, but costs continue to go up. And so I know Scott Davis is concerned even with that $1.6 million, but we worked with the architect and worked on that. That was our target budget-wise to try to get down to the 1.5.
How many square feet are we building at each?
At 1,600 square feet.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That's a lot. For those that can do the math quickly, that's $1,000 per square foot.
Feet.
And I'm going to say this again. $1,000 per square foot. You can build the Taj Mahal for less than $1,000 per square foot. This is what, and I know there's no way around it because we've got to go through DSA, which increased our cost by 30%. You've got to do prevailing wage and all the labor, which gives you another additional 30 to 50% on costs. I'm just saying, next time someone goes and buys a $1.6 million snack shack and restrooms would buy you a 6,000 square foot home in Granite Bay on Folsom Lake with some property. I mean, that's huge. And having said that, I'm going to plug my nose and say I move approval.
I thought you were looking at the cargo.
We did. Apparently they're not feasible.
I'll second.
We got a motion by Mr. Huber, a second by Ms. Hirota. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. Passes 5-0.
And for the public who's watching, we were looking at like cargo containers that were pre-built that you could just drop in sight, and they're not feasible for what we're doing. It is obscene. $1,000 a square foot.
Yeah, when we looked at some of those options, the cost was a little bit cheaper, but not much. But we had a lot of concerns on the long-term stability and quality.
They have figured out that at $1,000 per square foot, the cargo container guys are like, we can do that for $800 a square foot. That's exactly what happens. I'm serious.
Well, item 4.9, Fagan, Friedman, and Full Frost LLP agreement for legal services. This was an item to continue legal contract with who we referred to as F3. Joe, did you want to present?
So this is an update rolling forward the contract with F3. We only use that firm right now predominantly for business and facility issues currently, as we've used Lozano Smith law firm for the majority of the rest of our legal services. You'll notice that the hourly rate is up. They did give us, when we initially signed a contract with them, when we started with that, I think probably 3 years ago, we did kind of get a discounted rate, and so the renewal contract, it does have a higher rate, but it's pretty comparable to what we see Lozano Smith and other attorneys of this size. So staff recommends approval of this contract for the
Any
current year.
questions of Joe? I'll open it for public comment. Bring it back to the board for comments. Any comments? And again, you're using F3 for mainly facilities at this point.
Facilities, they're the attorney that works on the redistricting, so all business-related issues, and they may be utilized for something. We need a second opinion on an HR or something like that, so we would have the ability to use them for other needs.
All right. All those in favor say, do we have a motion? Motion by Mr. Consent, a second by Mr. Huber. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And all those opposed say nay. Motion passes 4-1. Thank you, Joe. Action matter 7.1, fiscal year 2021 unaudited actual revenue and expenses. Joe Landon.
Get the PowerPoint up here. All right, jumped ahead of me. All right, thank you. So we have completed the financials for the 2021 school year. These are the unaudited actuals. So these have gone through our process. We've closed the books, and you'll notice it's unaudited. So the auditors are actually have put in the request. So we're working with the auditors, and we'll be bringing back audited financial statements to the board for approval in December. But these are the results for the current year. So I'm not going to go over every line item, but please feel free to let me know if you have any questions. I'll maybe highlight some of the big ones. These are the changes compared to our estimated actuals. There's usually a lot of changes at the end of the year. One of the big items you'll notice is some of the grants, like for instance, it's kind of confusing. The Expanded Learning Opportunity Grant was moved from a state grant to a federal grant. The state decided to use federal money to pay for this grant, and so that's really an accounting difference because it changes the way we have to account for those revenues. We can't account for those revenues until we spend the money, where it's different in state and federal. So that's where that $3 million shows up. It's a little odd, but it doesn't change our available fund balance of the district in the long term. It just is an accounting issue. The other higher one on the revenue side you'll see or the other two are the state, when they adopted their budget, the final in-person instruction grant was higher than they initially told us, and so we got an extra $554,000 for providing in-person instruction. And the other one you'll notice is lottery revenue. We deal a lot with estimates. They don't really give us much until after the year closes, so that came in quite a bit higher than the initial projections. That was a good sign. And then you'll see on the expense side, we had some savings in a number of different areas. A lot of those were some COVID-related savings we tried to account for, but we didn't go to a lot of travel and conference like we would have normally done. We saved on mileage. We had some salary and benefit savings. So overall, it's quite a bit of a dollar amount, but I have those percentages to the right so you can see the percentage compared to our total revenue and expenditures. And you can see it's 0.65% of our total revenue and 1.44% of our total expenditures. So while the change to our ending fund balance of $2.8 million may seem like a lot, in the grand scheme of things, it's a fairly small part of our budget. But it's always good to be able to come in and provide additional savings. And while I try to keep that number low, I also don't want to come in with a negative number of we had negative $500,000. I'd rather come with some savings at the end of the year. So I won't go through these in detail either. This is the executive summary that shows some of the main highlights of some of the areas that we spent on and what the fluctuations were, so you can look through the revenues and expenditures. Happy to answer any questions on that. And this is our multi-year projection. This is the multi-year projection that I presented to the board back on June 29th when we adopted our budget. So what you'll notice in 21, 22, 22, 23, 23, 24, those are all pretty much the same. I didn't make any changes to the multi-year. So when you see the updated multi-year, you're going to see the changes in the current year, 2021, and that's a result of the savings that we had from the financials that I just showed you. But as you can see, we still have plenty of ending fund balance, and a lot of what we're dealing with and looking at is we've been given significant funding from the state, but it's predominantly one-time funding. We have a number of issues that we're going to have to look at with the reserve cap and how we're going to spend that one-time funding. So those are some conversations we're starting to have now, and that we'll engage with the board on how do we prepare for 2022-23 when we have to spend a lot of our money. And we're also working with a lot of the money the state's given us on some of the presentation you saw today on expanded learning opportunities and addressing some of these issues. We've been given a lot of money, and we're trying some things out and trying to make a difference on closing some of those learning gaps. Finally, I'll show the other funds. One I want to point out too, which is the biggest difference you'll see, is the cafeteria fund. So you'll notice that when you look at Fund 13, we had an increase in the fund balance of almost $2 million last year. And a lot of that had to do with the significant changes to the food service program. We were able to provide significantly more meals than we've ever provided because we were able to provide free meals to all students. We were able to get reimbursed, and those meals were provided via lunch and breakfast at the same time. So when people came to get meals, we were able to give them breakfast and lunch, and we were able to get reimbursement for both of those. And our labor costs were significantly down because we just made the meals and had them ready, and people came and picked them up. And so that's the one area where we had a lot of a huge increase in our ending fund balance in the cafeteria fund. So I just wanted to point that out, and we'll see how that plays out over the next year, because now we continue to be able to provide meals to all students and get full reimbursement, which is a big change. And then you can see these are our facility funds. I just want to point out the Fund 23, which is our Measure D funds. We've closed those funds out, and you can see the ending fund balance is 0. We will still get state reimbursement funds that'll come probably for the next 5+ years, as it takes a long time for the state reimbursement funds to come through. But those will be utilized to continue to finish the remainder of the Measure D projects that we had planned. So with that, I went through it quickly, but I know it's late, but I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Any questions from the board?
2020-21 unaudited actual revenue and expenditure report.
Motion by Mr. Huber, second by Mr. Constant. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Motion passes 5-0.
Joe, thank you. You make this easy to understand, or as easy as it can be to understand all these numbers. I really appreciate all the work that you do on this stuff. It makes a big difference.
Okay, thank you. 7.2, resolution number 2118, authorizing adoption of GAN limit.
Yes, this is an annual process we go through each year to authorize our GAN limit and provide that number to the state. It's our appropriations limit for each year, and it's a process we just have to go through.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Huber, a second by Ms. Hirota. Barbara, will you take the roll?
Yes, P. Constant. Heidi Hall.
Yes.
Julie Hirota.
Yes.
Scott Huber.
Yes.
And Andrew Tech.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Item 7.3, West Park High School tennis courts.
Yes, this item just came up recently as the city of Roseville. The initial plan was for them to build tennis courts in phase 2 of Pistachio Park, and it was going to be part of a joint use agreement with the city of Roseville. They have reached a delay where it's going to be a number of years before they are able to build those tennis courts. And so we wanted to entertain the possibility of, we found a location on our property. You can look in the exhibit and see kind of where we have some space where we could build our tennis courts, and would be our courts that we would own. We would still have a joint use with the city, and the city could use the facility, and it could be part of the community. They would pay for the, facility use for those courts. But when we talked with the city about the different options, they are still going to be at least 3-4+ years before they're able to do this. When I worked with Scott Davis and our architect, we believe we can roll this into phase 2 of West Park project right now and have these tennis courts built by the start of next year's school year. And then we could have those tennis courts available for use for the school. So that's where we wanted to bring this to the board for consideration. The estimated total cost is around $1.3 million. Currently, phase 2, we're doing very well with our contingency amounts, and we believe we'd be able to fit this, even though it's a very large change, we believe it can fit under our existing contingency because we haven't had to tap into that. So we feel like it'll likely be able to be purchased with their existing contract with Clark Sullivan in phase 2. So staff feels this would be a benefit to the district to have this built earlier and to have the ownership of these courts.
Board members' questions?
Did you say this was going to be a joint use still, these 6 courts, or the other ones will still be joint use when they're built?
These ones would be available as part. We have a joint use with the city of Roseville for all of our facilities. They did say that if we built tennis courts, they likely would not build their tennis courts. It wouldn't make sense to have these courts and then another. So they would do something else there, with their park.
I'm not envisioning how people would, because usually when the city builds tennis courts, they also build like a parking lot right by there, And I don't think we have something close by here.
It would be access to the baseball fields that are already connected to the baseball and softball fields. They have a snack bar that's south. It's a little bit of a walk. It's by the bus loop, so there's not a ton of parking there, but there is some parking. I don't think tennis typically brings a lot of people, so likely we would have to work on gating to make sure there's public access, like for instance during the weekend, because we want to close off our campus, but in the event we wanted to have it open, we'd have to work through some.
Get the city to build us one of those snack shacks that we were talking about.
Well, there's a snack shack they have. They could do it cheaper, I'm sure.
How much is in the contingency, the phase 2? What did you say, phase 2 contingencies? Did you call that?
Let's see. I know it's typically around the owner contingency around 3%. Scott, do you have enough rough idea of what our contingency amount? That's what was our total amount, or that's what we have remaining right now? Okay. So we believe Scott was saying we have remaining about $2 million. All of the issues that would have tapped into our contingency, the big issues have already been addressed, so we don't feel like there's any other big things that'll tap into that $2 million, so that's where we feel we have capacity to pay for this. But typically, owner contingency is around 3% for a new project like this, so yeah.
Yeah.
Does that kind of give you an idea?
Yeah, no, I'm curious how much is left in phase 2 if you're going to have 700,000 left after the 1.3, and that 1.3 going up based on this estimate compared to when it's actually constructed and the labor costs and construction costs.
Yeah. What's that? So you said our beginning balance was 2.4. We're at about 2.1 million right now.
When will it start?
The construction, it probably would still be 6 months or so, at least. Start around May and get completed by the end of summer. What's that?
Is 1.3.
1.3
I mean,
left.
is that going to be 1.3
Usually,
in May?
we got that estimate from our architects,
Okay.
and Scott was working with them. So, could it be 1.4 or 1.2? I think we'll be pretty close.
Unlike buildings where you have like steel and then HVAC and all that, with tennis courts you have concrete.
Our concrete costs went up.
No, I know that. But what I'm saying is, but that's the only thing you have to really calculate for is concrete and labor. You don't have to calculate for concrete, labor, steel, HVAC, finish work. You know, there's a lot less. You get what I'm saying. It's not quite as squirrely as doing a building.
No, I just had recent experience with concrete increases on projects. So, I mean, it was like over 6 weeks it went up.
There's been a lot of escalation.
Yeah, okay.
Would this be a revenue generator too, now that it's not a necessarily, could people still access it outside of school time, on the weekends?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a revenue generator. We typically don't get a ton of use, but we could generate a little bit of revenue for use.
But it is accessible by the public outside of school, on weekends, or is it behind a fence?
I think we typically would fence it off, unless the city wanted us to, we usually close things down unless someone wants to rent it out to use it, just to maintain the value of it.
Lights?
No lights. No, it's pretty darn close to housing.
It's right up against the houses,
Yeah, and when our other tennis courts in the district do not have lights, at least the ones that we own, the ones that are utilizing, like Johnson Ranch, I think they probably have lights. But
Scott says it's cheaper than the snack shop.
I'll move to approve.
And next, we need to get tennis courts back to Roseville High School.
I was going to say, the tennis courts at Roseville High School have portables.
Yeah.
We won't go back on the Antelope snack shop.
All those in favor?
We can't do that.
You
We got a motion and a second.
A second.
Motion by
Second
Mr.
by-
Rhoda and a second by Ms. Hall.
I was waiting to make a comment, sorry. And I know we're getting close to the witching hour. I just want to say I'm disappointed with the city because this is something could have easily made happen. And they just had a meeting, a week ago, talking about how to spend all the revenue they haven't figured out how to spend yet. And this is a community asset now that, because we're building it and it's not full joint use, the community is the one that gets the short shrift. And there's a reason we do joint use, so that we can maximize the availability
for the people who live in our city and our school districts, and they're getting shortchanged because of this.
All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion passes 5-0. Final item 7.4, proposed changes to salary schedule 13, athletic coaches salary schedule and salary schedule 1. Presenting Brad Basham.
Yes, I'll try to make this quick. I'm asking you to approve a couple of updates. One to salary schedule 13, which is the athletic coaches salary schedule, and one to salary schedule the 186-day certificated salary schedule. So we added a few coaching stipends. We now have 6 of our schools who offer the unified sports program. We have 3 that now offer esports, and 3 that offer both varsity boys and varsity girls lacrosse teams, and those are all CIF recognized sports. In addition, we've reached a side letter agreement with RSCA to do a temporary increase to the annual stipend and the contracted work days for our athletic directors. I'm going to try that out this year to see if it has an impact. It helps them to complete the work, the additional work that they've been asked to do as we've grown as a district. And so in your packet, you have Exhibit A, which shows the additional stipends as well as the temporary increase to the athletic directors. And you have salary schedule in Exhibit B, the second salary schedule, which shows the additional work days for our athletic directors. And so staff recommends approval of those changes to both of those salary schedules.
Any questions or comments?
Comment or question, I guess, is that last year, well, I don't know when it was, a couple of years ago, when we added the additional, I think it was the additional athletic directors on, started adopting a new athletic philosophy. I can't remember what that book is right now.
Inside Out Coaching.
Thank you, Inside Out Coaching. Are we still progressing in that direction? Yeah.
I think it's still a focus.
It's still a focus.
Fair to say.
Still focus.
It's still very much a focus.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Move to approve.
Motion by Ms. Hirota, second by Ms. Hall. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brad. Pending agenda items. What I have obviously is districts and trustee districts in 2 weeks, and something else. Oh, dual enrollment request. To have a conversation on dual enrollment sometime, and continued learning updates. Ms. Hirota?
I want to continue to see learning loss and accelerated learning updates.
Periodic, as soon as next in
Well,
2 weeks, or
you know what? I'd like to
down
see
the
it
road?
once a month.
Maybe once a month.
Because I think asking it for every 2 weeks and preparing updates is. I'd rather see the work get done.
Yep.
And have periodic presentations.
Okay, and we will have a discussion on the equity policy in the coming weeks at a retreat
or
that we will.
workshop. Mhm.
Yep. So I think, and as far as COVID updates, we didn't have one. School updates, I don't know if it's necessary to have that discussion at every single board meeting. I don't know how the rest of you feel about that. The district continues to update unless there's changes that need to be addressed by the board, take action. I know some of the public doesn't like it, but yeah, go ahead.
Well,
Heidi.
I'm just thinking there's gonna. Oh, Heidi, sorry. Oh, go ahead. I was just gonna say I have something, hopefully, that I'll be able to share at the next meeting. I don't know that it needs to be called a COVID update, but I'm hoping for data from the state tomorrow. They were supposed to get back to us August 27th. It then got moved to tomorrow. I know. But I'm hopeful. November 27th. But the data specifically that I'm waiting for
is regarding the lawsuit between Reopen California Schools and Let Them Breathe versus CDPH. And we've been waiting and we've been very patient. But 3 of the things that we asked for from the state is the outcome of close contact quarantines, meaning how many close contacts from last year who were quarantined, who got sent home, actually went on to test positive. That they said wasn't collected, so they have no data on that. And then the second point that we were asking for was the risk versus benefit on masking. Did masking decrease school or community spread? Did asymptomatic testing decrease school or community spread? And are the risk versus benefits, do they exist, right? What data does the state have to show that what we're doing is helpful? What data does the state have to show that long-term masking of children is safe, mentally, academically, etc.? So they were going to get back to us on August 27th with that data. They still don't have it. But tomorrow is when we're supposed to get it. So
Did you want that as an informational item, or how did you want to proceed
Sure.
with that?
Yep, I think just an informational item.
CDPH update.
Yeah, maybe a CDPH
up
update.
guidelines, communications. Is that what you want to hear too, Julie?
Well,
No,
I'm just trying to help her phrase it.
Yeah, because it's not necessarily an action item. It's not necessarily. It's just an information piece.
On CDPH guidelines.
Yeah, and I think, well, that is specific to the work Heidi's been doing, and I think I'll clarify the purpose of the COVID update since that came up tonight. I think initially was I had asked for the COVID updates before Superintendent Becker came on board. We were starting to get them. I wanted to give him the information that was an ongoing thing that we were expecting. I think purpose of it now for me, and I don't know how the rest of you feel about it, is if there's significant changes coming out from the CDPH, maybe we need an update on like how that affects the schools. Because I think the dashboard and information is out there. The communications have been fairly consistent from all the school districts. So if we just have major updates, changes in CDPH updates, then that is, and how it affects us is the most important thing. If there's no changes, I don't see a need to have it on there since we are communicating. But I don't know how the rest of you feel. So.
That's how I feel. It's kind of, we need to get back to the business of education. I know it's still a major concern and there's a lot going on out there, and we want to update our communities, but we're getting updated, the community's getting updated, unless there's an action item that we need to take action on, like the resolution that we passed 2 weeks ago. I don't necessarily see that we need to have it every 2 weeks, but
unless there's major changes from CDPH, which, it seems like it's very likely, but.
Pete, you agree with that? Okay, but you want to do a presentation or want a presentation?
It could just be an information matters. I think that works. I think I guess just my opinion is that in 2 weeks from now, things are going to be different. So I don't think there's any harm in agendizing a COVID update, but I also agree that if there isn't an update, then we shouldn't put it there. But I think it's also safe to assume that it's going to be different a lot.
Only if there's an update.
Only if there's an update.
Significant update that's affecting RJUHSD's.
How do you?
Yeah, we're not as of right now. We're not anticipating much, obviously, because next week there's a few things going on statewide, and I don't think much is going to happen here in the next probably few weeks. But you never know. I mean, if there's something significant that clearly needs this type of forum, then yeah, we would put it on there. But if not, kind of keep going the way we're going. Rob will send out 9 emails a day for the next few weeks like he has been. And we'll kind of just proceed from there, but it's kind of status quo right now.
Okay. All right. Next regularly scheduled meeting will be on Thursday, September the 23rd at 7 p.m. here at Wood Creek Cafeteria. Are there any board or staff comments tonight? The staff? Yes, Joe.
Attached to the agenda item. Okay. I was gonna say I recognize this. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Brad, do you have anything for us?
Many of you may not have heard about this, but yesterday we lost a 20-year coach and former campus monitor at Roseville High School, Danny Garcia. So Danny retired from our district a few years ago, and he graduated from Roseville High School in the early '80s. His family are graduates. I think his family are third generation Roseville High School graduates. Danny spent over 20 years as a campus monitor and a coach, primarily football. He was a varsity football coach at Roseville High School. He impacted the lives of many kids in our community. He was always very student-centered. He was a strong family man as well. And so it was just sad to hear that we lost Danny, but I just don't want it to go unsaid that Danny had a tremendous impact on Roseville High School and the Roseville community. So thank you.
What was Danny's last name?
Garcia.
April.
Just briefly, wanted to thank you all for your comments and your leadership, and would like to invite you to join me as I walk classrooms. I'm walking all of our schools each month, and in particular, if there's any particular class you'd like to visit, we would certainly welcome that. Had a great visit with Mr. Tagg earlier today, visiting an ethnic studies class. Our teachers are doing phenomenal work with our students, and we're in there, we're seeing it in action, and we'd love to have you join us.
Thank you. Heidi.
I was just going to say, I would like to come. Sign me up. I'll message you.
Pete. Julie. It's after 10:30. Scott.
I am going to just very quickly say two things. One, because of, we've sort of consolidated everything COVID to one person, I do want to shout out to Rob Hasty, who is sending out, I think, 9 emails a day. That's shortchanging it. There's way more than that. And so Rob, to quote Jack Nicholson from that movie, we want you on that wall, we need you on that wall, and thank you for doing that. The other people two other shout outs. I want to give a shout out to our AV people. If you notice, this is not some plug in a bunch of wires and sit back and eat bonbons while the meeting goes on. There's a delicate dance going on with all of the AV stuff and turning microphones on and off and on and off, and who's talking here and there. So I want to say thank you. And the other individual I want to give a great shout out to is Roseville PD. They're always here. They're always at games. They're always on campus when we need them. The number of issues that they intervene and prevent from turning into something that would wind up in the newspapers is truly nothing short of amazing. And it's all because of the relationship that they have with the students, with the teachers. I mean, these personal relationships. And quite honestly, they're just great people. I mean, they're just fun people to talk to and to get to know. And so I want to thank them for being here. That's it. It's 10:30.
Okay, John.
for.
Yeah, I just want to thank Dr. Moore and the Ed Services team for their presentation tonight. But last night they had their first LCAP advisory committee meeting at Oakmont High School. Had over 50 stakeholders present at that meeting. So it was a packed house at Oakmont. Had some nice food and a couple hours of discussion. So congratulations to that. And since he's here, sitting in the back, half asleep over there, Scott Davis, for his continued outstanding work in our district. If you just add up, West Park and Antelope by themselves, over $300 million worth of school facilities that are world class, in leading that charge. He has done amazing work, and just want to express my appreciation to Scott. And from now on, we're going to have all the clocks in this room say 10:30 when we start the meeting, so Pete can just ride out the meeting. We'll be all done. So.
Well, thank you, and I want to shout out to Dr. Moore and appreciate the time today with her and Avery Beebe, who is one of the ethnic studies teacher at Roseville High School. I sat through the course, very engaged students, and I plan to do this on an ongoing basis with the ethnic studies course, just to see it from my own eyes. And I definitely didn't see any Marxist indoctrination at today's course. So I will take that for a good sign. I know there's public concern out there, and I appreciate what you're doing as far as the due diligence that we've asked you to do and to come back with you on this topic, and to, as we look at it ongoing, as well as the equity policy. Bring back to what I remember the equity policy when we first came on the board and attended CSBA, and what equity meant as far as an equal opportunity to learn and to bring more cohorts up to taking AP courses, IB courses, A-G requirements, graduation rates. I think it's got meshed at times, and it's an important topic for us to dive into. Thank you for doing that. That's it. We're done. We're adjourned.